Hey, this is Mike Herrera. You're listening to Magnified Pod.
This is a yelling podcast. From poking at you to plans and everything in between, this is Magnified Pod, the only podcast that discusses culture, religion, politics, and the entire discography of everyone's favorite left coast punks, MX, PX.
And in today's case, Chicago punk rock legends, much the same.
That is correct. I'm Andrew.
I'm John.
This is our podcast, and this is the first interview podcast, in-person interview podcast I feel like we've done.
In a while.
It's been a while. And so with us today, we have Chris McGrath, lead singer of Chicago punk band, Much the Same. Chris.
Hello.
So glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Welcome to our basement playroom / studio.
Yeah, we pulled out all the stops at Magnified Studios West.
That's right.
We do have Magnified Pod legend Harriet to your left, snoozing adorably.
Yep. The dog is always nearby.
Yeah, whenever we record, she needs to be around. It brings me great comfort. So
well, it's nice that she knows that and just goes and lays down there.
Yeah, she greets me at the door every time I come. I'm sure she does that for pretty much everybody, but it makes me feel special.
Yeah, man.
So before we launch into the proper interview portion of this episode, there's something that as we briefed you before we started, was our obsession with Starbursts. And sitting before you,
I've got two.
You have two. Yes, it is a red, which is the cherry, and the pink, which is the strawberry. Did you know they had particular flavors other than just red and pink? This is something we're discovering, is that not everybody knew that pink was even strawberry.
I did know. I'm a fan. These are my favorite. And
That's right.
One of the most traumatizing things that has ever happened to me is getting one of those, when your kids are trick-or-treating or whatever,
for sure.
and you get the little two things, and they were both yellow.
Oh.
This was really a terrible day.
This is why I know we're going to get along. We have some diehard yellow fans who...
Are they psychopaths?
What was the...
you didn't bring them here, did you?
They're not here today. Lemonheads. They prefer to go by Lemonheads.
They prefer to go by Lemonheads. But do you know, it's funny that so many people are so opposed to yellow. But do you know what I don't hear anybody talk about? It's orange. Yeah. Nobody has...
because orange is just...
It's fine.
Kind of in the middle.
It's fine.
It's hanging out.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It's fine. But the lemon, just the one hack that we've learned is if you take a lemon and you put it together with a strawberry, it's sort of, you get this kind of like pink lemonade kind of thing going.
No,
you're not into it.
No,
you're just gonna let it. Let it be.
Why ruin a good thing with a terrible thing?
Right.
Fact.
I mean, most people, it comes down to red or pink, but we want to know on the record, is it red or is it pink for you? So
I think I always think red is my favorite, and then I have the pink, and then I realize that the pink is better.
Right.
I think that's the way it goes, but I definitely enjoy both.
It seems to be consensus. I feel like I'm pretty lonely on the red front.
I mean, it's close.
Yeah, it is close. I mean, you were correct before we even started, and I pointed them out to you on the table. You're like, well, those are the two best flavors. I'm like, yes, that's right. That is accurate.
It wasn't an accident, which is good.
Yeah.
What do you do when you leave two of these sitting here on a desk and they go, where's the yellow?
Right, yeah.
I mean, you just make them leave?
Politely and firmly ask them to leave.
This interview is over.
It hasn't even started, and it is done. So,
speaking of politely asking someone to leave, this is already a tangent, but a friend of mine sent me...
That is our
good.
That's our sweet spot.
Just today, a friend of mine sent me a picture. He was in, I won't get into the whole story, but he was in Canada, and something went wrong, and he was asked politely to leave and never come back.
To
And
Canada?
The nation.
yeah.
Wow.
And so they gave him this very nicely worded letter that the heading was "Allowed to leave Canada," and then it said, "You are formally allowed to, request to leave and leave immediately." And then at the very bottom it says, "You acknowledge that you agree to leave immediately, but you are allowed to leave
Right.
immediately."
Yeah,
It was
they-
like, that's the nicest
That's the
get
Canadian
the
way.
F out
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
ever ask for.
So
feel
what
like-
did he like
Yeah, you have
talk
to do
shit
something
about
pretty-
Tim Hortons, or
Um,
did he like throw poutine on the ground? What happened?
I don't know the whole story. I know that he is a felon
Oh.
and was there out of the kindness of the government's heart, and then he did something to someone in the government or something, or had an interaction that
Yeah.
was not appropriate. I'm not quite sure. He's kind of an activist, so
Okay, gotcha,
yeah.
gotcha.
So they were just like, "Yep, never mind." But anyway, I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah,
that it
that's
was
amazing.
so kind.
Yeah.
You were allowed to leave.
Please never come back. Here's your complimentary maple syrup.
Right.
Goodbye.
He should definitely frame that letter.
I mean, he had it on hand to take a picture
Right,
of. So
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Moving on from Starburst, I feel like the other important thing we've been talking about before we started recording is fantasy novels,
yeah.
which you're a big fantasy head.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah. Do you want to just say what you were saying about Brian Sanderson?
Oh yeah. So I'm a big fantasy fan. Have a huge bookshelf of way too many books, which you can actually see a little bit in the video
Okay.
that we just released,
Uh-huh.
kind of in the background. I've had the opportunity to do what they call gamma reading, which is like volunteer proofreading for, I think, one really big Brandon Sanderson novel and one novella,
Okay.
and then 2 or 3 books from another guy named Michael J. Sullivan that I really like. So, so that's really fun. So I was just saying that I got the opportunity to hear them say my name in the audiobook from like this famous narrator that I've been listening to for years, which was really weird. But
pretty
it was
rad.
nice to have me in the acknowledgments for something, New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, man.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like what I was asking before is like when it comes to fantasy, the real purists are like totally out on Game of Thrones. Where do you stand?
So I actually refuse to read it,
Okay.
but only because he takes so long.
'Cause
Like
it's not done yet.
it's too long. I don't mind
Oh,
reading
okay, I see.
unfinished things. I have
Sure.
a lot of unfinished series I'm in the middle
It's
of.
kind of normal
but
in fantasy to not
but,
really
like,
complete.
10 years between novels, and there's
Yeah.
at least 2 left.
Yeah. No
I'm
good.
just going to wait.
Sure.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to
Okay.
read it all at once. And so I haven't watched the show.
Okay.
I have Dan, actually, our guitar player, is a enormous Game of Thrones fan, like has read the books over and over and over, and he was never really into that kind of stuff before
Sure. Yeah.
Game of Thrones. He's into history and politics and stuff, so he's a gigantic fan. And actually there are a bunch of lyrical references to Game of Thrones and things that
Really?
Martin has said, like, snuck into the album. So
Nice. Well, now I'm gonna
might-
be looking.
yeah, we might mention a couple of those. But
There's that chorus all about dragons, which makes more sense now.
Have you ever watched the show Party Down?
no,
No.
That's so
okay.
good.
It's
I've never even heard of it. So
it was like 2 seasons. It was on Stars. Like it was Adam Scott pre Parks and Recreation. I'm not sure if you ever watched
Okay.
Parks and Rec,
yeah,
but there's a Martin Starr was in Party Down, and his character Roman, he identified himself as hard sci-fi. And that's when you guys were talking about like the purity of fantasy. It made me think of like hard sci-fi.
Yeah, totally.
So you gotta like, there's a delineation between like the people that think about like Star Wars
Right.
as sci-fi,
which
and,
is
like,
really fantasy.
which is like like fantasy western, space
Yeah.
western.
Yeah. Oh, hard sci-fi. Yeah, it's a thing. I'm not
Yeah.
super into it. I have some books. I've tried it. It's a little too, like, they get really excited about a scientific idea and
Yeah.
write a 1,000-page novel about it, and often don't remember that there should be a story.
Sure.
That's my impression anyway. Some people would kill me for saying that, but
I think it's fair.
I don't know how many hard sci-fi. I know we do have some Lord of the Rings buffs. Hard Lord of the Rings
And I
buffs.
actually am very much not, which surprises a lot of my
Yeah.
like. I have huge
Fascinating.
arguments with my nerdy friends. I'm pretty nerdy.
Okay, well, let's. Can you briefly break down your issue that you take with, because this seems to be like, if you're like a fantasy guy, and I don't know,
I'm gonna say some things that have made my friends very angry.
Okay.
So I read The Hobbit in high school. I wanted to read Lord of the Rings, and then learned I should read The Hobbit first, or I don't know where I got that. But so I tried to read it. I got a couple chapters in, and remember thinking this is really like a children's book.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I wasn't expecting it, so I kind of put it aside. And so then I went probably 5 years ago-ish or something like that, and read it again, and like powered through and just hated the whole experience. And realized it's because if you read like the first couple of pages, it's basically Winnie the Pooh. Like the way he talks about everything, it's just that exact voice.
Yeah.
So that's annoying. But what's more annoying is that every chapter has Deus Ex Machina in it, where
That's
it's just
true.
like nothing resolves naturally. It's always some magical thing that saves the day for nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would argue, well, I've heard good arguments about why it's a good book, and I can see it, but it just. And I read it to my son, who was 6 or 7 at the time, and we read a lot of. I mean, he was 5, and we were reading all the Harry Potters and everything, and we got about halfway through The Hobbit, and he's like, "Daddy, can we read something better?" And I was like, "My son, okay." Like I did not. I don't think I influenced that at all, but
That's pretty good.
yeah. So
What about Harry Potter?
yeah, we're a Harry Potter
Okay.
family.
We are we are a house united tonight for
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
Yes.
I said that like a Canadian speaking Canada. A house united.
Who's-
Okay. So
I'm glad I'm accepted into the.
yeah, man.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I have one more thing about kind of fantasy stuff, and this I don't know. You both might throw me out, because I feel like the way your friends feel about your conviction about Lord of the Rings, people feel about my conviction about how Dune is unbearable.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah,
Like that's a rough take to have.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Not a fan of that.
No,
But
I know. No, trust me.
There's
it's-
a piece of it that's unbearable in the middle somewhere. But
I know it's not a popular opinion, but like it was one of the most excruciating
wow,
novels that I've ever experienced.
those are strong words.
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
But hey,
this
it's
interview's
it's
over.
punk to be have
you go.
unpopular opinions, right?
anti-establishment, anti-Frank
The
Herbert.
establishment is Frank Herbert. What do you think about the new movie coming out? Like, sounds pretty cool, right?
I look forward to. I'm
Yeah.
cautiously
Yeah,
optimistic
yeah.
every time they adapt anything.
Sure.
It's usually a disappointment on some level, but there are rare occasions. Like I read The Magicians and just hated it, and then watched the show, and I mean it was a cheesy MTV kind of
Yeah.
millennial.
It's got some cheese.
whatever, but I enjoyed it much more than the book. So so you never know.
It looks pretty cool from everything that I'm hearing about it. But
Is Kyle McLaughlin coming back?
he's not in this one. But what's the? I think it's only one novel, and it was like planned as a series, but she didn't do more. Where it's like a pair of magicians, and it's like maybe like 18th century England.
Oh,
It's like somebody and Mr. Somebody.
Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan
Yeah.
Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Yes,
Yeah,
I love that one.
yeah.
all I
I
have
haven't.
to
Oh,
give
the
you.
show. Yeah.
I love the show and the book.
Okay, I haven't seen or read. I
okay.
have the book, which is anybody who knows me and is listening to this is going to laugh because that's usually like 75% of the things we talk about.
Right.
Oh, I haven't read it, but I have
I
it
have it. Yeah, I have a big
because I went
stack.
on like a 7-year bargain book spree
Nice.
and have around 1,100 novels and have read about a third of them. So
Oh my gosh.
I'm working my way through them, but I keep buying more, so that doesn't help.
Well, if you come over the history of much the same lyrics, perhaps you'll see references to fantasy things,
Yeah.
Easter eggs, etc. So a little context of the band for maybe those who don't know. You guys formed in
Who's this
1999. They should know. 99, right? That's when you first.
Yep.
Okay. Ish.
Maybe 98 really
Okay.
was when it started, somewhere
Okay.
in there, but our first show was 99, so that's kind of when I say it started.
Okay. And then the records you put out were in 03 and 06. And 06 was Survive, which is now out on vinyl. Will be out by the time this episode drops, I think.
Yeah, so June 14th,
Okay.
2019 is when it comes out. So
If people don't know Survive, you need to know Survive. So pick up that vinyl. The album rules.
When you had announced that the email or some post about pre-orders for the vinyl, but it was like a lot of it was like Canada or Europe, and I was
Right.
I'm like, did I forget? What day is it coming out in the States? And I came to realize, yeah, it was not that last week, but so John and I have talked about this a bunch of times, that somehow being in Chicago, being a huge punk rock fan as a young kid, somehow you slipped under the radar for me, and it's such a bummer that I didn't know your music. I feel like I've been robbed of like 16 years of being a fan of the band, but like now I'm 100% on board. I think Survive was the first album I heard, and I was like, holy shit, this is so in my wheelhouse of everything that I love. And so when I heard that album, then you guys are coming out with this new music, I felt like this is such a gift for all the fans who have been like struggling for the past 13 years with, without a full album. I feel like it's like, it's a blessing and a curse, I guess, that I get to have all, experience and listen to your back stuff while at the same time getting to get the new music right away as I'm,
I guess that's nice. You don't have to wait.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, thanks. I'm really glad to hear you say that, and it both surprises me and doesn't. Like, we're not a huge band. That's fine, and it's who knows how many people out there haven't heard it, and yet I hear all the time like, oh yeah, Much the Same. That's the band that I saw 15 times without ever actually wanting to, because we just opened for everybody we could,
Yeah.
which we're very lucky to have a lot of cool shows back in the day. And then we broke up for 8 years and had families and stuff, and so we're just kind of getting back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Much the Same wasn't your first band name.
No,
What?
there were a few actually.
But
It
one
started off as the Huxtables,
I am so glad.
Yeah, today that would be a little tougher.
and then
Be
it
a
was
tough look.
well. Then it gets worse. It was Trouser Mouse for a little while.
That sounds like a lot like Mouse Rat. Or,
Yeah.
Yes.
And then it was Antisocial for a little bit.
Okay.
And then Don't Look Down was
Yeah.
the name that kind of stuck until we found out there was another Don't Look Down in
Right.
New Jersey, and then we had to. Well, that's a long story, but they had a lot of lawyer fees after I got done with that. So
Oh, so you battled with it a little bit?
they became aware of us, and they were a little bigger than we were at the time, and I don't know that I would say they sued us, but they got a lawyer involved. They hired someone, and yeah, I know how this stuff works. So I'd email the guy a random question every day, and their bill went very high because every email was like an hour, which is like $150 an hour or something. Which,
Nice.
that was probably the most spiteful thing I've ever done to somebody I didn't really know. But then later we met them. We played in the same town in New Jersey or somewhere one day, and they were really cool guys, and it was super awkward, but we like made it a point to like get together.
Sure.
That's cool.
And then they were cool, and we did a bunch of shows with them together. We actually played with them and Fall Out Boy at the Metro once, like,
Oh, dope.
so it was, before they were huge, but
And back when they were passable as punk rock.
yeah, they were a good pop punk band at the time. And so, yeah, we used to do a lot of stuff with them when they were first coming up, which was fun and fun to see them kind of explode. So,
Yeah.
How do you feel about the label skate punk? Because I feel like that's what usually much the same is tagged with.
yeah, it works.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think any of us have ever skated.
Right.
I hung out with a lot of friends who did, and I was just telling my wife the other day, like, I probably spent a good 2 years like sitting on the sidewalk while all my friends were doing kickflips and stuff. And why the heck didn't I ever just pick one of them up and try? Like,
Yeah.
so much wasted time just sitting around. I mean, talking with your friends is fine, but
Right.
I could have been doing something productive,
Yeah. I mean, I think that, we were talking about like right in our wheelhouse. I think skate punk for Andrew and I very much is like right up our alley, but I know there are these designations about what's pop punk and what's melodic, what's
Yeah.
hardcore pop,
Right.
But
I mean, we've been called everything from like
Sure.
pop punk to melodic hardcore,
Sure.
which I think depending on the song, probably all of those apply. But
Yeah.
I used to not like the term pop punk just because I associated it with a very kind of like cheesy, silly, like I like a little more aggression and,
Yeah.
and all that to my music in general. And, but I have to accept that, I mean, we write pop songs. They're just really fast.
Sure.
Right.
So, which is what Green Day used to say when Dookie came out, like, oh, our songs are super fast. And they were in 1994. But,
Right.
so if people call us, I saw somebody say that, I think on YouTube today, like, this is the first new pop punk band I've really liked in like for many years or something. And I was like, I'll take it.
Sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The part where he says he likes you is
Right.
probably the most important
That's what's
part.
important, right? I don't
the
care
label,
what you call
the label
it.
doesn't really matter. And yeah, I think, and also to your point, depending on the song, and this is with the new album, the first two albums had some more, screaming, a little bit more guttural,
Yeah, it was the early 2000s. I mean, that's what you did.
I know, but I mean, it had that aggression that you're talking about that I'm super into.
Yeah,
So-
and me too. Yeah, for sure. Like for me, I want music to always be, if not angry, I mean, at least I have to feel some testosterone coming through the speakers. But I also want to sing along. Like, I can appreciate hardcore and
Sure.
a lot of those kinds of things. Like if the singer's just yelling all the time, like no matter how good the music is, I just can't really get into it because I just love melody and harmony. Like that's my thing. So, but yeah, I always want it to be a little harder. And this album is got a little less of the aggression, which wasn't intentional. It just was. These were the songs that ended up being ready, and that's fine. Like we're not gonna. There's a little piece of me that was like, oh man, some guys in Spain are gonna be really mad that there's not a lot of yelling or whatever, and
Sure.
that may be true, but whatever. I mean, this is what we wrote, and it's cool, so we're happy.
It's definitely cool. I mean, we can tell listeners that we got a little sneak peek at the album. It's awesome. And yeah, we should say it's called Everything Is Fine. Comes out July 26th, right?
Yep.
And so that'll be we'll play the single maybe?
A little bit later.
Okay. But yeah, the new single Snake in the Grass, yes, is out now, and the album comes out next month. And then I mean, you were talking about you played with big bands back in the day, but you guys toured with Face to Face within the last couple of years, right?
That's true.
Yeah, and that was like, I mean, I feel like there's a strong Face to Face vibe.
Yeah.
With you guys.
100%.
They were one of
Yeah.
my favorite bands growing up, and like the tight harmonies, and I mean, yeah, for
and
sure.
also blisteringly fast. Like
Yeah.
when I think about, I mean, when I was, preparing for this, I was thinking, I don't know if bands like to be compared to other bands, but I guess if they're like iconic
Right.
bands, there's not a problem with
Yeah.
it. But do you have like if someone because like I think of like Face to Face, no use for a name, 88 Fingers Louie. Those are like those sort of like fast melodic, heavy harmony, melodic punk rock bands. Like were those some of the bands that you grew up listening to, or
Oh, yeah,
those some of
for
your
sure.
influences?
I mean, 88 Fingers Louie is actually the first punk band I saw live.
Oh, snap.
It was an accident, but only, I mean, they were,
Like
I
a
meant
lot of
to
the
be at the
people
show.
seeing you.
no,
play.
exactly. Because I went to see Rancid in 1995
Where was that at?
at the Vic.
Oh man,
Um,
it's a good show.
And so it was funny because I see this band on stage and they're really good. And I'd only been into punk for probably 2-3 months at this point. And really liked what I heard. And I went up to somebody and said, who is this band? And they're like, I think it was the Lunachicks. And I'm like, all right. So I go to the booth and I buy a Lunachicks shirt and a CD. And then they hand me the CD and it's all girls on the cover. And I'm like, this is not the band. But I'm like, a timid youngster. I'm not going to tell this, like, hey, wrong band. Sorry. Like today I might, but at 17, I was definitely not going to do that. So I just held on to it and just hoped the next band was going to be good. And no, they weren't.
Not into Lunachicks?
No.
I haven't heard them in a long time, but I remember liking them when I saw them.
I mean, they weren't awful, but
Sure.
I remember listening to the CD many times, really trying to like it. But yeah, I never found out for like a long time who that was until much later. I like found the ticket stub or something and was like, oh, this is that band that has that Blink song on the, Fat Music comp. So, and now we get along very well with those guys. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, Face to Face was an early one. I mean, all that early Fat Wreck stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, our bass player, like Scott Shiflett, the bass player from Face to Face, that's like absolutely his number one. I mean, he basically just says, I just rip off Scott Shiflett with everything I do. So it was
But
really,
those bass riffs are pretty awesome.
Frank is phenomenal.
Yeah,
Frank is
he-
incredible.
he-
And he keeps getting better. Like he
Yeah.
was great before, and he's got another band called Burn Rebuild that he sings for.
Cool.
And so he's kept up his songwriting chops and everything. And so, yeah, he just keeps getting better. It's incredible.
Yeah, he sounds great. So you mentioned, so I should say, we know each other from church, which is like
Yeah.
a little different context than the Vic, seeing punk shows in the 90s, although we were both doing that. I guess I was doing that slightly after that. But was the Christian punk scene a part of your life growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up, raised a Christian, went to church all my life. And Christian music was pretty much all I listened to growing up. You guys asked earlier what my first album was. And it was Petra, This Means War.
Nice.
Definitely talked about that record.
And I was like 5th grade maybe. And like,
Sounds about right.
that was heavy for 5th grade. Like this was,
Yeah.
that was, and it's still, I've gone back and listened to it and been like, this is weird, but still kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up with all that, and then got into punk in '95, my senior year of high school, and pretty soon after that, somebody handed me Pokin' At Ya, and that was kind of my first, there's a Christian punk band, so
Yeah.
it's very appropriate for your guys' podcast that's what it was. But and then like very quickly got into Goaty Hook and Value Pack and
Yeah.
some, I don't know, I'm sure there were a few others. I mean, Dogwood later was like my number one all-time favorite Christian band.
What about
Just
Slick Shoes?
yeah, Slick Shoes was good. They weren't at the top of my list, but they were definitely in there. Some of the other guys were huge fans of theirs. What else?
Thoughts on Five Iron?
I was kind of in the middle of like getting over ska at that point.
Okay.
But I liked them a lot better than the Supertones.
Yes, correct.
Because I got the first Supertones record at like a used CD shop, and I was like, all right, Christian ska band, and I was reading the lyrics, and they were like, very Jesus-y.
Yes.
And I was, I was cool with that, and I get it home and put it on. I was like, ugh, this is awful. Even at like 17, was like, what are they doing?
Right.
So yeah.
I only ask because they're the next band that we're doing a deep dive on.
Five Iron?
Yeah, on the pod.
Yeah. I was never a huge fan, but it was definitely like I'd seen them. Like it's cool music. I think I was just a little bit over ska by the time I'd heard them. So
yeah, we talk a lot about how their lyrics were kind of some of the early sort of social justice awakening stuff for us. So that was important.
Although I didn't get over Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, who we are going to play with in August. Like,
And
that's exciting.
I already have my tickets for that show.
Nice.
That'll be at 350 Brewing.
Yeah.
Our buddies. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's run down that. That's Boss Tones, much the same. Direct Hit, the Menzingers,
Iron Chic,
and
Anthony Ranieri
from Bayside.
Zebrahead.
Is that Saturday or is that
those are all Saturday? Yeah.
Okay.
And who else is on that? Somebody else I should be mentioning at least.
I don't. Yeah, I'm trying to think that because I remember
just Google 350 Fest and you'll see it.
Yeah.
Who else we got?
Buck 09.
All right.
Buck 09.
Which was one of my early ska,
yeah,
ska bands that I was pretty into.
Yeah,
well, that lineup is nuts. So
Suicide Machines on Friday.
Yeah,
and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes.
Mustard Plug.
So excited!
It's gonna be. Yeah. Speaking of, also 88 Fingers Louie playing on Sunday.
On Sunday, that's an all Chicago show, and I would have liked to. Well, I'm really happy to be playing Saturday, so don't get me wrong. But when I saw the Sunday one, I was like, oh, that'd have been cool. But our guitar player lives in California, so he flies in on the weekend. So we usually only do Saturday shows, and he flies back on Sunday. And so it was kind of like, oh, I would have liked to do that, but it wouldn't have worked out. But yeah, Naked Ray Gun and Bull Weevils, 88, and a bunch of other good Chicago bands on Sunday. So that's going to be an awesome. That's the first time they're doing a whole weekend, and yeah, that's exciting. So,
and also I saw this that 350's doing this. If you have a ticket to 350 Fest, there's like on the Thursday night, the Lillingtons are going to be playing a show. If you have a ticket to 350 Fest, and it'll be a free show if you have that ticket.
I heard also something like that for like October. I want to say October, but it might not be October. At some point, Pulley's coming.
Yeah, because they were supposed to be.
Yeah, they were announced to be on it, and then I don't know what happened. But so apparently there's the same thing. If you get a ticket for that, you get to go to Pulley for free at Reggie's too. So
yeah,
that's cool.
Also on that Lillington's bill is the Eradicator.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with Eradicator?
I'm not.
A Chicago punk band, hardcore punk band, based on a Kids in the Hall sketch from like 30 years ago about this guy who calls himself the Eradicator who plays squash, and
there's a whole band around
the
that.
whole band is around this one concept.
Sometimes a good gimmick will.
And they're legit. It's the guy wears like this ski mask and he has like a squash racket and it's like wears a polo shirt and it's just a hardcore punk band.
Yeah,
it's amazing. So
are all the songs about that sketch? Wow,
they are.
That's dedication.
It is. So yeah, you should check. I've mentioned them numerous times on this podcast.
We gotta get them on the pod.
We should get them on the pod because it's so weird. It's like such a niche deep dive thing that people are like, oh, remember Kids of the Hall? Yeah, was that the Canadian sketch groups? Like, sort of. I remember that. Remember that one not really.
Yeah.
But you want to come see my band about that?
It's not like it was like their breakout sketch or anything.
Right.
It's like, yeah, kind of a deep cut.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're definitely in that scene. Were you playing in bands and stuff growing up too, or did that come later?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got into punk, like I said, 95. Started playing guitar right about then too, and it was basically like right away, because I'd been singing on some level all my life, and right away, I really want to be in a band, and I would tell people like, oh yeah, I sing, and I remember one specific time, like I'm in gym class, like telling my other punk buddy that I sing. Oh, sing me something. No, I'm not going to sing you something in the middle of gym class. That's awkward. But that like moment was like very crucial to me realizing I needed to learn guitar, because like there was no way I was going to ever like sing for anybody if I couldn't play an instrument.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so I got an acoustic and started teaching myself and stuff. And by that summer, I had gone to like a church camp. And like I don't know, I had a spiked bracelet on or something, and saw another kid with gosh, I don't remember if it might have been Bull Weevils t-shirt, and so instantly it was like, hey,
Yeah.
you're one of us, kind
Yeah.
of thing. And like he heard me singing some random song, because now I'm showing off, right? Like,
Sure.
I can play 2 chords, and he asked me to join a band, and so that was 96 that I joined my first band, and we weren't very good, but we stuck it out for a while, and it wasn't really my thing, but I was in a band and I was excited about it. So we did that for a while, broke up. I just did college and stuff, and then eventually put this band together, and that, like I said, that was 98 or 99. So and that was originally a Christian band. It was all guys from the church I was going to, and we kind of cycled through a few different members for a while from church or guys they knew or whatever. So for quite a while, I mean, we were playing a lot of those Christian which basically just means church basements.
Yeah.
Heart and
did you ever
Soul
play
Cafe,
Heart and Soul?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
We played there. I don't remember if it was with Goaty Hook or Hangnail, but
I
one of the two.
saw
It's a good show.
I saw Hangnail at Heart and Soul before.
You were one of the many who saw much the same by accident.
No,
perhaps.
this is the weird thing. Like this is why it baffles me that it's somehow like, especially when as you can see, I'm wearing an anti-flag
Right.
shirt, and your first album was out on AF Records, and I was at that time 2003 when Terror State dropped, and that album was everything to me, and like that, like it's kind of when like I just sort of like went off on a tear on political punk rock.
Right.
Like and I was like devouring everything that I could, and it's like, and then like I discovered recently you were on some of the Anti-Flag records doing background vocals.
Yeah, I did Terror State
and For Blood and Empire.
right, which is definitely, that was my favorite album of the year.
Those
for sure.
Those two records are my favorite Anti-Flag records.
Me too. And not because I was on them. I
No.
just really liked them a lot.
No, man, this guy's kind of full of himself. Isn't it? So I want to kind of get into so 2003. How did you get on the radar of Anti-Flag and AF, and did you reach out to them? Did they hear you? What was the deal?
We played a basement show somewhere way on the south side with Whatever It Takes, which was Chris Number Two's other band.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly how that came about, but it was this like little basement, there's probably 20 kids in there. And it was a fun show, and I don't know that we played particularly well or anything, but it was kind of like, oh, hey, we like your band, and you have a label, so you should put out our record. And I don't really remember how it went from that initial meeting to like actually doing it. but they were super cool. They were into it. We were aware that we weren't quite what I would expect AF Records to put out, because we definitely weren't political. I mean, we have like one political song, but it was on the next album. So, but yeah, they were into it, and they put it out for us, and that was definitely a huge step up in terms of like street cred for us. Like, before we'd had like one EP that we put out ourselves, and actually technically a Wilhelm Scream's old guitar player put it out on his label, Tank Records, long time ago. But yeah, it was definitely people started taking notice, and we'd see more Mohawks at the shows, basically, like, which was cool to see that. So
Yeah.
So, did you? I'm curious about those times in the studio with the band. Did Justin or Pat or somebody reach out to you and say, "Hey, you want to do some vocals on this?"
yeah, pretty much. It was. I mean, they were going to record the Terror State, and so we were already on AF, and so they grabbed like 4 or 5 of the singers of the bands. So Mark from The Code, guy from Thought Riot was on it. I'm sure there was 1 or 2 others that I'm not remembering right now. But so it's basically like, hey, we have a label. Let's just get all these singers that we know.
Yeah.
And so I drove 8 hours by myself out to Pittsburgh. And I think Tom Morello produced that one too, but he wasn't around.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, so it was basically just, a couple of days of us just in the studio, like, okay, here's a song, here's what you're gonna sing, like everybody sing this. And I mean, it was super fun to get to do that, and for the album to be really good, because that was cool after the fact of listening to it and going, man, this is great. And then the next one, basically same thing happened with the next one too, which I think was in California, and I had to fly out. But
you were moving toward Nitro Records, right? Was that was for the next record, right?
I think we were still on AF by the time For Blood and Empire came out.
Was that,
so we
I
had.
thought it was like, was it
I might be
2000?
wrong, but
I don't remember the timeline. I thought it was like either late 2005, early 2006.
it could have been around that time.
For Blood and Empire came out March 2006.
Okay, so yeah, so we must have already been, if not already recorded, we might have already recorded it. I guess we did. We were recording right about then. So yeah. So anyway, but we were on good terms. Like they, we told them, hey, like Nitro wants to put out the next record, and we're under a deal with you, and we haven't recouped our costs and all that stuff. And they were really cool about working something simple out with us, and said like, no, we don't want to hold you back. Like, that's great for you, so go do that, which is cool.
Man, what that I have next to no experience in the music industry. I've only been in a handful of bands, but that doesn't sound like it's commonplace for something that generous to happen, for people to be like, yeah, man, we just want you to do well. We don't want to hold you back, rather than like being like, you owe us every penny that we gave you.
Right. No, they were always cool about it. I mean, there's a business side, and we wanted to make sure that they were happy with the business side of things too. So, I mean, but it was just 1 or 2 conversations of, can we do this? Because that would have really, we would have been bummed too. I think they knew, like, yeah, we can hold on to this band and make them stay on our label, but how much are they going to want to stay if we're like preventing them from a bigger opportunity or whatever? So
we all know Justin saying, huge capitalist.
Right. Yeah. No, those guys were always very genuine with, because we got to do some shows with them and stuff, and they were just really like, there was a lot of politics. Some I agreed with, some I didn't. But you could always tell, and this is something I try to be very cognizant of in general, is like, what's the motivation behind whatever your political stance is? And, you can have the same political stance as me and be a huge jerk about it and have it be completely like badly motivated. And in their case, for the things that we didn't agree with, I could still clearly see that they were coming from a place of like really caring about people and that
Right.
their experiences had drove them to a different conclusion than mine had, but both were kind of, humanitarian motivations. So
Right.
it's really easy to respect somebody that you disagree with when you can see how much they care about people.
And when they're also not a colossal douche,
Right.
that makes it
That helps.
that helps a little bit if
Yeah.
you can have a conversation with somebody you disagree with, and they're not being a horrific person to you.
Right.
That's
Well, and we didn't disagree about a ton either. So, but I don't remember any like deep discussions about the stuff that we didn't agree on. But I was probably too afraid to, well, these guys are huge and my bosses. Like, I better keep my mouth shut. But really, I mean, it's like 95% we agreed on a lot of stuff. So,
yeah.
So you talk about going from playing in a Christian band before what became much the same to hanging out with Anti-Flag, which probably not a ton of people can say they've like bridged those worlds necessarily. I know So Much the Same does not have a faith affiliation, but you are outspoken about your faith. Could you talk a bit about what that was like to navigate the band with folks of different beliefs or faiths? Like, was it intentional did you want to join a band that wasn't within that sort of Christian scene, or did it just kind of happen that way? Like, how did all that shake out?
I think I never wanted to be in the Christian scene.
Yeah.
I was a Christian. My friends were Christians. And I wanted to be in punk. So, I mean, my first punk album was, About Time by Pennywise, and then Punk and Drublick. And so, like, it wasn't like, I mean, a lot of people do kind of find it through the Christian stuff. Like, I definitely came in from Fat Records and Epitaph. And so it was just kind of natural. Like, well, I'm writing songs. What do I write about? I'm going to write about the turmoil in my life, which was mostly the conflict between the faith that I had and the actual life I was living, and trying to figure all that out. And so it started with all Christian guys, and then kind of one by one, the Christians filtered out and non-Christians filtered in. And I was confused by that at the time. It was probably not an insignificant thing that I was probably a huge douche myself in those days. Maybe still am, but hopefully less.
I mean, when you're young and it's the late 90s and you're in a punk bands, we've all had those.
Right. I'd like to
stretches.
just, super punk. No, I was just really selfish. But so, by the time we really got going, it was, I think I was the only like professing Christian, and all the other guys. I mean, I had met one of them in a youth group, and he wasn't a Christian, but he was coming to this youth group, for friendship or whatever. So everybody was kind of like Christian friendly, at least. And there are some songs on. I mean, so the first song on Survive is called "The Greatest Betrayal," which is not written by me, was written by Frank, our bass player, and it is about kind of his back and forth struggle with the idea of God, and do I want to follow this God, or is it really just a way that I get out of things? Like when I'm in a mess, I'll call out and then never mind.
Yeah.
So we all kind of were cool with that subject matter, but over time, like, now it's like officially like I've probably gotten more Christian, and the other three guys are like staunch atheists, and it doesn't really impact anything. I mean, they know like there's certain things I'm not going to sing about if they hand me lyrics, which probably makes them upset too at times, because that's kind of their art as well. But I try to be respectful too, and not like, I don't want to be a preachy guy anyway. Like, I don't think that works.
Yeah.
But I try to be respectful in the things that I write too, to say like, hopefully these are things that people can just appreciate are about me and are not like trying to push any particular view.
So on the subject of lyrics, some people assume that as the singer, maybe they assume incorrectly, that you write the lyrics. So do you write some of them, or are you just like you know.
Yeah, I used to. I mean, our first album I wrote all but two. I think of the music and the lyrics. I mean, we all write together,
Okay.
but I brought most of that in. For Survive, it was very even. Like all four of us wrote lyrics and music, and usually not for the same song. So,
That's cool.
I mean, even our drummer Jevin wrote two or three of the sets of lyrics, two or three sets of the music, and we just kind of mix and match and figure out what works, which is a really cool collaborative way to go about it. At this record, I didn't write basically anything. Like I
Wow.
wrote no lyrics. I mean, I don't want to say no lyrics. There might be a line here or there that I suggested, but these are not my songs. These are the other guys, mostly Dan, our guitar player, because he's gone through a lot the last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, this is all kind of their stuff, and I just kind of came in and tweaked some melodies or a line here or there during the demoing. So
Yeah, you mentioned so that the first song off of Survive the Greatest Betrayal. Betrayal is and damaged relationships is a very it's a recurring theme, it seems, on your records, and especially Survive.
yeah.
So like some of the songs like Gut Shot, Take What's Yours, Skeletons, Stitches, Picking Up the Shattered Pieces. So what was happening with you guys in 2006? Like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, like, because
That's a good question.
some of the songs, especially the song Gut Shot, resonates with me on a visceral level. Especially, and like, part of me like wishes I heard that song in 2006, based on the same very similar situation that I felt like a friend of mine who was like family was throwing me out. Which of these was this part of the, like you said, the collaborative, like, well, I guess this is kind of what we're all going through right now. Let's make this.
Oh, I don't think it was anything even that conscious. I think we were just, all dealing with maybe similar things. I mean, we were in our 20s,
Yeah.
and relationships have a tendency to blow up.
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak to the one kind of, well, there's a couple betrayal type songs that I wrote, which are both on the first album. Masquerade is the one that we play the most of still, but that even, like, I listened back to that years later and was like, man, I'm a dick. Like, that's just at the time I thought I was very justified in thinking this person was a liar and not the friend that she claimed to be, and really I just liked her and she didn't like me, and she was trying to be nice about it, and I was taking it wrong, and so there's some of that. The stuff on Survive, Gut Shot, I mean, that's kind of your typical just two friends going in different directions and being mad about the way that it's going down, and
Right.
Take What's Yours, similar situation with an old bandmate from another band of one of the guys. I guess we had a few of those. I didn't really ever think about that, but it's funny too, because people lately have been calling us like a posse band, like, oh, you guys are always super positive, and we're all sitting here like, what? Like, we've just all been really angry.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, I guess Skeletons has a kind of a positive. I think we often try to look for the bright side, or like something good to hold on to, and maybe that comes through because we're not just like screaming profanities. We're trying to be like thoughtful about what's going on, but no, I'm like positive. No, we were pretty downers.
No,
I thought.
It's not. I don't think your albums are bummers by any
No,
stretch.
just angry punk
But-
rock, right?
Yeah, but like you said, the lyrics are thoughtful. I'll read some of the lyrics, and I'm like trying to, like, sometimes I'll try and make sense of, like, kind of like, try and get in the head of the writer is not always easy, but like, yeah, I'm like, positive. Like I don't know what.
It's not the word for it.
No,
Yeah.
just because you're not, throwing up middle fingers in the middle of a set, then maybe that's what people are.
I mean,
That's what they expect from a positive punk band. I guess I don't know.
I think you were right that you were saying you don't aim to come off as preachy, and I don't think you guys do at all. But I think there's a clear grappling with heavy themes, and I like the fact that you kind of have to, that it's not preachy. It's left for you to kind of interpret what you think might be going on. So that's actually kind of a good opening. I know you're saying you were not the primary lyricist on a lot of the songs on the new record, but like there's a couple songs related to kind of like faith that are really interesting to me, and like I wondered if you could speak to them at all, like Man of Science, Man of Faith. I mean, first of all, the opening riff is like an instant classic that rules. But I mean, could you talk about kind of the themes and the subject matter of that song? Like,
Yeah, so the title's a reference to Lost, which I think that was like the first episode of the second season, where Jack and Locke are kind of button heads about the way they see things and stuff. And so it started out just straight up a song about that, and kind of evolved into just kind of like saying like, why does it have to be that people who have these opposing viewpoints have to always be trying to like talk each other down all the time, and why can't we either just choose to get along or try to understand each other better? So Dan did write that song, our guitar player, and I mean, it's something that I'm always feeling very strongly of, like I said earlier, like if I can understand where you're coming from, I can disagree with you and we can be fine, and it just really makes me sad that more people can't do that. Because we all want to think that we're right, and we all want to convince everybody else that we're right, or at least I do. But you can't even start that discussion if you can't have some common ground and some mutual understanding. Because if you're trying to tell me how you feel and I'm just like, no, you're wrong, where's the conversation? There's nothing. It's just two people shouting at that point. So that's kind of what that song's about.
Okay. Yeah, there's another song on the new record called You Used to Have a Garden, which kind of seems maybe similar in terms of like a falling out maybe over outlook on the world. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
it's
so that
kind of a metaphor, right? But
actually that is probably one of the most literal songs on the record, and I don't want to speak too much to someone else's story, but I think he said this publicly already. So one of our guys, basically just watching, it's a song about his father, and watching the father kind of like lose motivation to live pretty much, and just kind of, things just go downhill over the years, and their relationship becomes very strained. The garden that he mentions was a literal garden. He had a garden in the backyard, and that was kind of always the thing that like he was into. And at some point, like he just got to a point where he didn't even have a garden anymore, and it was so the garden, in a way, I mean, it was literal, but it was kind of a metaphor for how the whole family dynamic kind of went south. And I remember like where I was when he told me just that line, that's what he wanted to, I was like, oh, that's a song, you have to write that. All I heard was that title, and I'm like, that's a great song.
No, it's really good.
And it turned out so much, like he sent us a voice memo. He just like in 2 hours like wrote all of the lyrics and the music and just sent it to us on acoustic and was like, here, I just did this, what do you think? And we're like, well, that's a hit song. Which that will actually be the next
cool.
the next song we bring out at the end of the month. So
right on. I have other questions, but
go.
I mean, yeah, so we're talking about kind of the band reforming after a hiatus of several years, more than several years. And, a lot of bands, especially bands that we've talked to for this pod, like are going the Kickstarter route these days. And I just wondered, how do you not do that as a punk band reforming today? Was it intentional to kind of avoid that? How did you guys decide to put out the record, and how did it happen?
Yeah, I mean, when we started up in 2015, it was like, hey, we're going to be real quiet. We're not going to tell anybody we're writing. We're just going to write and just see if it works, because we don't even know after 8 years if we can still write songs, let alone write together and have it be good. And then we booked a show like a month later, before we'd even finished one song. I think it was actually the first 350 Fest.
Right.
Was our first show back, and then it was kind of out of the bag, like, oh, these guys are doing stuff again. So the intent the whole time was to write an album, and it took longer than we expected because of a lot of stuff we'll probably get into. But as far as Kickstarter, yeah, they're just some of us wanted to do that, some of us didn't, and we are very democratic about the way we handle things. So it was kind of just decided, like, well, if we're not all in on that type of endeavor. I mean, we had, right before we broke up, we crashed our van in Washington, and we're stranded, completely totaled our trailer and half our instruments. Like, bass drum was smashed in, all the guitars were in two pieces. Like, it was terrible. And so we had insurance for the van, but not for the rest. And so we had to just ask, like, please, somebody help us out.
Yeah.
And we got enough donations to buy a new trailer and all new, either fix the gear or buy new gear.
Wow.
Which for a band our size, I mean, that was a lot of money,
Right.
And we felt terrible asking in the first place, really thankful that we got it. And then we broke up months later, And so that was kind of always a sore spot of just going, we don't really want to ever ask people for money again. And so even though Kickstarter isn't really asking for money,
Right.
it can be seen that way. And so, and really it doesn't cost an enormous amount of money to record an album anymore. So
Sure.
it's kind of like, well, we're four big boys with real men jobs, and, we can find the money. So, so that's basically why we didn't do it that way.
Okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I've been dominating.
No, that's fine. If you have a question that's kind of based on that.
No.
Well, I wanted to talk about the album "Everything Is Fine." So, can you talk about what the title means? Because
Yeah.
for people who haven't seen the album artwork, it sort of elicits this maybe the appearance that something might be okay, but in reality things are falling apart.
It's also dope. The illustration is super cool.
Yeah, the artwork is amazing. Who did the artwork?
My friend Seb from Stereo Design. It was funny. He's an old fan that I talked to back in the day. He was doing t-shirt designs and stuff, and we just never had a chance to use him for anything. And then years later, we started talking again, and then we finally met him when we played in Canada last year. And I recognized him right away, and we hung out all night. Like, super cool guy, and yeah, so it was, and his artwork is just phenomenal now.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty no-brainer decision to ask this guy who's become one of my really good friends. Like, we talk almost every day, to do this. And yeah, he knocked it out of the park. I mean, he helped us develop the idea and stuff. But so the title comes from a song on the album. So a little backstory. So Dan, our guitar player, after going through a difficult divorce and writing a bunch of songs about that, which are on this album, then gets cancer. He basically, it seemed like it was going to be okay. It's testicular cancer. It seems to be a cancer that can be easily treated, but it had spread by the time he got it taken care of. And so over the course of months, it just kept getting worse. Like, they'd keep putting off his surgeries and stuff because it just kept getting worse. I mean, I remember, sending him a text during church one Sunday morning, like, "Hey, how you been?" He's like, "Actually, I'm in the ER. I was coughing up blood." Like, oh, that's not what I expected. And then the day after Christmas, I got a call that he was in the hospital again, that he'd had a seizure while he's watching his two kids alone. And, you know, the paramedics had to knock down the door and take him in and all this stuff. And his mind was not there because the cancer was in his brain now.
Oh my gosh.
So he's like he's attacking the doctors and nurses, and just he has no recollection of any of this. And so they had to like tie him to the bed because he was so violent. So just very scary. And, you know, I mean, his cancer has gotten to the brain now. Like, I have officially gotten to the point where my friend is going to die. And we didn't want to believe that, but it's hard not to at that point. And so he was kind of in the same place, like, okay, I'm a father with 2 little kids, and I'm going to be dead in a year. And so he actually, part of the seizure caused his hands not to work properly anymore, which is not what you want as a guitar player. And so he couldn't have a guitar in the hospital bed, but he bought a ukulele because it was something. And so he was just basically trying to strengthen his hands up again, and wrote this little tune about accepting that you're dying. And so that's on the album. We were going to do it as a full band at first, and then I was like, it's haunting the way he sent it to me, like on the phone, just a ukulele and him singing. Basically, I just imitated that on the album. Like, I just basically played it exactly as he played it for me. And so the first line of the chorus is, "I'll still tell you everything is fine." And it's just I was talking with him about that of, well, are you just BSing somebody, or just trying to not tell them how bad it is, or are you really okay with that? And he was kind of like, can it be both? And that was kind of like a core concept of like, everything can be falling apart and you hate it and you're okay with it, and just having to come to terms with all of that. So it's a short song, but that's what that's about. And so as we were working out the kind of the design for the album, and we had a different title, and then we came up with this cover idea, and I was in the middle of like demoing the song, and so it's going through my head, and I'm just like, Everything is Fine is so much more the title for the cover that we have. And it was pretty quickly decided that was going to be it. So it all came together very well. It's definitely not a posy cover by any means. It's pretty dark. But you know, we think it represents the album well, and we've actually had some really nice compliments on that. Like, one guy wrote to the artist and said, "Hey, I work with, you know, kids with emotional problems, and this is like a visual representation of what their life is like." And that wasn't really, we weren't trying to get super heavy in that way. It was kind of just, you know, supposed to be about the song or the album or whatever. But really cool just to hear multiple people have said that they like just the image itself like does something for them that they can relate to. So we're excited about that for sure.
How is he doing?
He's all better. After the seizure thing, he went through a crazy chemo where they take out your stem cells and then they just blast you till you have nothing left, and then put them all back in to rebuild you, and they do it again and again and again over the course of months. And so they got the tumor down to, I mean, it was basically just in his abdomen. It was about the size of a cantaloupe, which is just, I mean, that's huge, you know. And they took it out, and everything was fine.
Wow.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, it pretty much instantly just you're all better. So, I mean, hopefully that will remain for the entirety of his life, you know.
Yeah. Jeez.
Man, I feel like I need to give this guy a hug.
Right?
How
that was a hard year for, I mean, obviously for him more than anybody, but
that's enough
for
like a lifetime to just like, like I don't know what my face looked like as you were telling me that, but I just that's, you know, and this is why I love talking to artists, because, you know, you hand this album to somebody and they'll be like, yeah, that's pretty dope, you know, melodic punk rock record, when there's just so much depth and honesty and pain that is behind all of this. You know, I think that's just I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm
So-
sure we're not special in that either. Like probably every record we listen to has stories like that. That you know,
Sure.
if the guy wanted to talk about the situation, about the breakup song that he wrote or whatever, you know, that it would be, you know, pretty painful.
Yeah.
Right.
At least at the time. So
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I think we all like I've written some pretty cringy songs back in the day that I think would probably have like
Never.
no, but like that, you know, I think have the depth of my truth and my pain, but they're
Yeah.
but anyway, that's thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that he's okay.
Yeah.
And that he was able to contribute that, because that song is as certainly a departure from the rest of the record and anything else you've done. So that was going to be an eventual question to
me
kind of
too.
like, you know, some new
like, why a ukulele song? Yeah.
no, like I think for a third record, you know, to try some new things. That was my assumption, was that there was, because the Passengers, the closing song, straight
So good.
banger.
Yeah.
Like
So
the,
good.
the swelling of at the beginning and the piano,
Gang folks.
the
love those
gang
gang
vocals. It's got this. Do my stuff on. This song has everything. But yeah, it's so. What was that? I mean, obviously with the you know, the ukulele song that had its origin, but like with some of the other, you know, was it Man of Science, Man of Faith that had that sort of like
There's a chip tune in the beginning.
chip tune, yeah, the like it's sort of 8-bit like
Yeah.
which I was also super into. And then like the Passengers, did you go into this record thinking like, let's broaden it a little bit, or where did those ideas come from?
But like everything there was turned out naturally. Like, I mean, I remember a specific point where somebody said like, we need more beeps and boops on this album. and I was instantly like, okay, like, all right, man, it's all of our stuff, and that's not what I'm into. But I mean, the little chiptune thing started because that intro of that song used to be in a song that Dan and Frank had in an old band after we broke up that they had written, and that had kind of a synthy thing to it. It was very different. It was more of a Paramore kind of band, so that fit. And so, but we liked that, and we're like, let's try it. And I tried putting it together, and it just didn't sound like we'd sped the song up, and so it was like, this isn't really working. And then I just thought, oh, wouldn't that be funny if I just did it like an 8-bit, you know? And so it was just an experiment at home.
It was great.
And it rules.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you like it, because that's definitely one of those things where I'm just like, God, I hope people don't think this is super dumb.
No, like I mean, I obviously don't speak for all, you know, pop punk fans or melodic punk fans, but like that, it's not like you were like, this whole thing is going to be nothing but chiptune, you know. It's like,
Yeah, we aren't I Fight Dragons. Like, they have their thing.
right, exactly.
Just a little taste.
Or Anamanaguchi, or
Yeah.
like something like that, just like Nintendo Core,
Yeah.
you know, that sort of thing. Like,
Horse the Band. Remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, know the band name, not really.
Yeah.
A little bit of a deep cut, I guess. But, you know, I think about going back to Anti-Flag's For Blood and Empire. They had, you know, this whole back catalog of just straightforward political punk rock, just guitar, bass, drums. And then they like started throwing in some horns, and they just started experimenting with like other instruments and stuff. And I think but they weren't, it was like just like a little flourish here, a little
Right.
piece here, just to accent.
You're not trying to change your sound, but you find new ways to layer things.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And-
cello's not a super unique thing to do in punk anymore, but we got that in there. We have a little bit of piano.
Right.
And yeah, they are definitely all just, I mean, pretty much everything we write is like just whatever our heads tell us it should sound like. So as we're playing a song, like my brain will say, there should be this there.
Right.
And I can't argue, like, oh, yeah, that would sound cool. Let's do it. So usually that's how it goes. With the beginning of Passengers it was written a bit differently. Is actually funny, and this won't make a lot of sense until people hear the song. But originally it was written as like a straight fast beat song, and I was super into it, like really excited about it. And then Dan said, "Hey, I wanna slow that down and like make it halftime and kind of a more Foo Fighters thing." And I was like, oh. And again, just goes to show that like my instincts are definitely not always right, because like he and Jevin got together, put the song together, and brought it in, and we demoed it, and we're pretty happy with it. But over the course of like adding things and tweaking, and Nick from the Swellers, who produced the album, like gave us a couple of feedback bits, and so it's just kind of a back and forth over the demoing process of like, this is the first time we ever had any kind of recording ability.
Right.
I mean, these days it's just so nice, like I just plug something into my computer and go, so it's really fun to like build the song piece by piece and like send a recorded version to the band and be like, what about this? And they go, nah. What about this? Oh my God, that's amazing. And
Right.
so it goes back and forth. So that song was kind of like just a back and forth, like, let's keep trying things until we found something that worked. And once it worked, it was like, whoa, what did we just make?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've heard from the few people who've heard the record that's been pretty much everybody's favorite or second favorite song. So
It's such a perfect album closer song.
Yeah.
It rules, and it feels like a closer to me.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about going through the MXPX discography, songs that feel like a good album closer, or songs that are like, I have an unpopular opinion about one album closer song that I don't really like, but this one is, to me, like hands down it. Did you know going in, like track listing, like, or were you like, this has to be the opener, this has to be a closer?
We got really lucky with this one. I mean, I take track order like super seriously. Like that for me is like a huge factor of putting
Sure.
an album together. And pretty early on, we had, like, Dan wanted to do the first two songs on the album. He knew that he wanted those to be the first two, and those are some of the older songs. But as we were putting other things together, like, things just started to fall into place based on some dynamic or another. Like the last three songs, like the third to last, like has a quiet, it kind of fades out, and then you have this ukulele song, and then Passengers fades in, and those kinds of things just kind of were obvious. Like, we wrote the songs individually, and we just looked at them and go, oh, well, that needs to go there. And the funny thing is that Passengers was originally supposed to be somewhere in the middle of the album, and we had a different one for the closer. And then I heard a band called Coral Springs, who just came out with an album, and I listened through, and the first time through, the last song of theirs was just so anthemic, and I was like, we need a better last song. Like, the song's good, and actually I like it much better now on the record than I did in our demos, so who knows how that might have gone had I heard them first. But it was like, do we want to put like maybe our favorite song in the album last?
Right.
Like, how do you do that? And we just said, well, it's like, we'll just promote it as a single or something, to make sure that people don't miss it if they listen to the first three tracks and get bored or whatever.
Fools
and so,
if they think that.
I mean, when you're writing it, you just don't know. You don't.
Right.
I still am like really pleasantly surprised every time people say that they like the whole thing. Like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, it's 4 years of like,
Yeah.
No, I can, and maybe this is part of it, but I can honestly say that I legitimately like the whole album, and I think
Co-sign.
Bangers beginning to end. Obviously, Ukulele, not much of a banger, but like, but still an excellent song. But still, like, is that part of why it's 9 songs? Did you try and trim it down to the bangers and cut out some of the riff-raff?
Actually, it went the other way. We were originally going to do 3.
Oh.
We probably had 20 songs that were like at some level of written, whether it was like a whole song but the band hadn't all worked on it, or like there was a verse and a chorus that we knew was real strong but we'd never really finished it. And so originally it was like, hey, it's been long enough, like let's just get something out. So it's like, all right, let's do like 3 songs. And then 3 turned into like 5, which quickly turned into 6. And then there was the ukulele song that we were like, yeah, we could throw that on. That's 7. And now we're at like 23 minutes or something. And we'd already booked studio time for like 7 songs. And we're like, let's just throw that 8th one in there. It is basically done. Like, let's just do it. And then Dan wrote Passengers. That was like the last thing. And it almost didn't make the record because not everybody liked it at first. Like, it was like initially was very like, we're not really sure if this is like ready to go or whatever. And it just all kind of fell into place. So, so there's 9 because we booked studio time, and 9 was what we had done by then. But that has always been kind of like, I don't really see the point in writing a mediocre song, and that's gonna sound. I'm saying that kind of jokingly, but I'm a little too much of a perfectionist, and I drive my band crazy, really crazy. But if the song isn't like if I can't play any individual song and be like, here, this is what we do, and think people are gonna like it, like why even bother? Right. So and yeah, older stuff. I mean, that was true then, and now I don't like some of those older songs so much, but I do feel like still Survive and Everything Is Fine are like all songs I can get behind still, and that's just my goal. So
I cannot wait to get Survive on vinyl. I'm a big vinyl nerd, and that album rules so hard, and and I'm just so now I feel like I'm hogging.
Jesus. Continue.
Okay, I don't know. I guess this isn't. I don't know if this is a fair question, but considering the gap between your last album and this record, and the time it took to get these songs together, what is the future of Much the Same?
That's a good question. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants because, like I said, Jevin, our drummer, lives in California. We all have jobs, and I mean, this is definitely a very part-time thing for us. And we're really like #blessed to like be in a position like we were not a very well-known band at all when we put Survive out, or even after that, and then to have 8 years go by and have the album have like gained steam just doesn't really, I don't think, happen very much, and we were certainly surprised. So it's hard to write an album when you live in separate sides of the country and all that, and so really, I mean, like I said, we still have a lot of material that is already like kind of half done, and I'd say like we could do another EP if we just finished the songs that we like even think are kind of ready, which is cool. Like we've always been super slow at writing, but it just kind of fell together that way. So I mean, for this year, like we're doing this album, we're doing 9 shows in Europe. We're gonna do the 350 Fest, and we've got a couple other things we're trying to work out for the rest of the year. And then hopefully just a break, because I feel like it's been like 4 straight years of like work. And I mean, for Dan to have gone through everything that he went through, which obviously, slowed the process down some.
Selfish.
Man, that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so future wise, I think we want to keep on keeping on. Like we were already talking about potential things for next year.
Love it. Into it.
When there will be new, like, I mean, I'm not going to make any promises, but I would say it'd be really awesome to be able to at least put out another song or two next year, just for the sake of like, hey, we have material. Like, we're
Sure.
not going to wait another 4 years or whatever to put more stuff out. It's not really the world we live in anymore,
No.
anyway, and which is why we were going to do 3 songs and just be like, okay, well, here's something.
Sure.
And then, but I'm so glad it was a real, like a full album, because I'm an album guy. I don't want to put out a couple of songs and they just kind of float, like people get excited for a week and
Yeah.
it's easy for them to disappear, or at least that's what happens to me.
Yeah,
So
I feel like music has I feel like music has become and maybe it's always been this way, but I don't know, maybe with the accessibility of streaming, that it's almost like songs are just like this easily digested thing. It's like, oh, I just consume them and then you're done with it and you forget about it and you don't care anymore. It was the song of the moment and now you're on to the next song. But
which is easy when you don't have to go buy an album, right?
right,
Like,
right.
it's here. I heard it.
It's in the
it's
back.
pretty good.
It's in
and
the
then
background. Who cares?
if I'd bought it because
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty good, well, now it's sitting on my table or it's sitting in my CD player and I'm going to hear it a bunch of times. But I
Right.
can't tell you how many. I've just listened to a whole bunch of bands recently where I'm like, man, there are a lot of, like, Europe and Quebec are really killing it with like fast technical punk right now. And like, I probably couldn't name half of the bands that I thought were phenomenal because I like have them in a Spotify playlist and have to like go back and check again. Like, who was that? But
you
they're
100% are going to hook me up with that list.
I will.
But
I mean, I'll plug some now. Like the
Please
ones
do.
I know offhand. Like Adrenalized has an album recently that's just awesome. They're from Spain.
like a
Drones
Def
in the UK has they're like another like kind of Wilhelm Screamish, but it's a girl singer. They're super good. Colors Fade, which I'm pretty sure is from Quebec or Canada somewhere. Thousand Oaks from, I believe, Italy. Those are the ones that come off the top of my head at the moment. Although, Mainline 10, who I'm pretty sure is European as well. Those are just bands that like recently just heard and like the whole album through was like, man, these guys make me feel stupid. Because we are not a shreddy band by any means. We're fast, but like we're not these crazy technical.
Don't undersell the sick riffage
Yeah, man.
that you guys bring. There are, we were
Some
listening.
shredding on
There-
Stitches.
Yeah. I mean, Dan's definitely a good guitar player. What's funny about Dan's playing is he grew up listening to like Creedence and like Led Zeppelin and that kind of stuff, which is, it's like all his dad's old vinyl. So our style is not based on the 80s metal that a lot of band stuff is,
Sure.
like the thrash metal. It's like I can't play guitar that well, so I'm just playing a lot of power chords.
Sure.
And Dan's got kind of this cool classic rock kind of style that I definitely love everything that he does. Like I'll bring in a song that's just a few chords, and the first thing he plays, like the song American Idol on Survive, like I brought that song in, the lyrics were by the drummer, I wrote the music, and I was pretty happy with it. And the first thing Dan played was the riff that is now the opening riff, and I was like, well, that song just got twice as good. Like no effort,
There we go. Not bad.
Yeah, that's like off the top of his head,
Yeah.
just like, oh, what if I did this?
That's pretty rad. That might segue well into what I was going to ask about next, which is, I think this record is probably the best sounding of your albums. I mean, apart from sort of the musicality of it, just like production-wise. And, you mentioned Nick from the Swellers, who we've talked about on the pod before, because the Swellers had guested on Plans Within Plans, MXPX. But so he produced and engineered it. What?
What's the band name?
I
didn't
think
hear
it's
them before.
PXMX. And how did that partnership come about, and what was that process like?
Well, I mean, we go way back with the Swellers. Like we met them. They showed up to a show we played in Chicago. They had driven from Detroit, and they were like 16 and 17 at the time,
Wow.
and like handed us an EP, and we got in the van and put it on, and we're like, well, that's the best thing I've heard this year. I mean, just like, what? How? That's not even fair. And so, and we've been friends ever since. And they just got like better and better with every album, and certainly overtook any minor success we were having over the years. And so when it came time to do a new record, we were talking about who to record with, and we had some different options. And I was just like, guys, like Nick has his own studio, and who would we want to record with except a person who, like, I mean, it sounds weird to say, but like someone who literally grew up on our music and then did it way better than we did it. And still likes the band. Like, why would we not want him to be the guy that is gonna like help us like tweak the songs and make it sound the best it can? And so it was kind of a no-brainer. I mean, we definitely had other ideas too, but Frank had recorded his other band's last EP with him too, so he'd already kind of been through the process with him and was like all on board. Like, it's gonna be a really good time. So yeah, that was pretty much a no-brainer. And Nick just, like, he's so knocked it out of the park. Like, I knew it would be good, but I literally just texted him today, like, okay, so I've listened to the album like a lot, and I'm still as impressed today as I was a month ago with how amazing like all the tones are, and just the mix, and the vocals are super clear without like being overpowering, and I can't believe how good he made that sound. And I have to mention, our friend Scott Hallquist from 10 Foot Pole recorded the drums at Ryan Green's studio in California. Okay. And he also, like, just the drum tones on this are like what we've been looking for.
Can I just speak to Jevin for a moment?
Yeah, please.
Jevin, you are a beast. I'm just endlessly impressed with the proficiency of his drumming. I'm just kind of like with a lot of your, especially Survive, and especially in this new album, I don't get bored. You talked about like maybe someone listens to the first 3 songs and they get bored. And I'm just like, I don't know how, because especially with the drums, he's doing like little fills and things here and there, and it's just like he's so fast. He's unbelievable. So he wasn't on your first record. How did you meet him?
Yeah, he was in a band called Form Follows Failure back in the day in St. Louis, where he was going to college, and we toured through and played with that band a couple of times. And so when our old drummer left, obviously, who are we going to get? And we're thinking about Chicago people, and we tried out a couple of friends and stuff, but they were like, hey, I think somebody called somebody and was like, oh yeah, Form Follows Failure broke up. And they're like, excuse me? Like, because it was just like, oh, we gotta get that guy. So we called him up and asked him, and I didn't even know if he'd remembered us or was a fan or anything. I don't know how much he liked the band at that point yet. But he was like, yeah, that'd be cool. I was actually just about to move back home to California. I could move to Chicago instead.
What?
Like, just perfect timing. Like, and I never could have guessed what a contribution Jevin would have to the band, because, like you said, I love bragging on my band. Like, I'm so happy to have these 3 musicians who are just like each bring something really special to the table. And probably every band thinks that about their band members, which they should. But like, yeah, Jevin was like, not only was he phenomenal at drumming, but then the fact that he could write songs, like really good songs, and he was like the driving force for us. As soon as he joined, like, he'd come from a band that practiced 5 times a week, and so when he showed up and we practiced once a week, he's like, what are you guys doing? I thought you were a real band, So he was very motivational, and in fact, the song "Wrecking Ball" on "Survive" was a song he wrote about how I should be trying harder because I have more potential than I'm tapping, which was like, meant a lot to me to see that someone saw that in me.
Yeah.
So it was, that was very personal. But yeah, my favorite story about Jevin was, so I was writing the song "Living a Lie" that's on "Survive," and I'd gotten like a verse and a chorus and a bridge, and that was about it. And I was like, it probably should do the chorus a couple more times and stuff, but it just feels done already. And it was a little slower then, and I was like, I don't know, maybe if we played it really fast, and like maybe that it could just be a fast, quick, like we'd never done that before. And I was like, Jevin, can you play that like super fast, like strike anywhere kind of like where you're not hitting all the beats in the fast beat, but you're kind of just, da 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 da. And he's like, well, I could, but I could also just play the fast beat really fast. And I was like, okay, do it. And he plays it at that, and which I don't remember. It's like 220 beats a minute or something, 230, somewhere in there. And me and Dan fall on the floor laughing because he's like flawlessly playing this thing faster than we've heard anybody play that beat before. And it was like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna do that. Like that's awesome. But yeah, speed aside, like his creativity is awesome, and like I said, it helps that he's a songwriter himself. So we always, we get bored if the second verse sounds like the first verse, like, we have a lot of choruses. We do our choruses a lot, but we always have to change up every part of every song somehow to like just keep it a little bit interesting as it's going. Because otherwise we'd get bored. So,
can we play a little bit of "Living a Lie"?
Yeah, go for it.
It's a shame to think you have to live this way. It's a shame that you'll never have known. You travel so far and you'd have so much power. If only you would let the real you show. It's a shame.
I mean,
That's nuts.
come on.
That's nuts, man.
a minute and 9 seconds. I mean,
Get in and get out.
Get in,
It's
get
punk rock,
out.
baby.
That is unbelievable. Love it so much. So,
And you'd never think that was inspired by a Ben Folds song, but
Fascinating.
is it?
yeah, that the lyrics to that were my version of "Jane" by Ben Folds
Oh, that's a
5,
good
which
song.
is a very slow,
Yeah.
contemplative kind of song, but
Interesting.
yeah, same concept.
I'm gonna move in a different direction.
This is our patented hard left turn into
Yeah, I mean, not that hard. It's related to what we've been talking about, but just you have 2 young sons. We've talked about this is a part-time endeavor for you guys. What's it been like striking the balance of being a dad, being a husband, having a full-time job, and getting back into the band on top of it? Because originally that was kind of part of why the band broke up, right? It's kind of that work-life balance a little bit, or
We probably mainly broke up because I was a huge jerk. Yeah, but yeah, now it's it's tricky, but it works. My wife definitely makes some sacrifices. We don't tour or travel much, so like, people ask it, which is, I was just thinking about this the other day. It's really exciting actually to have more like people asking us to do stuff than we can actually do. Like if we could do all the stuff we were offered, we'd probably like burn it out in 2 months and like, oh, there goes all our demand.
Right.
But when you can only do like 10 shows a year, you have to be picky, and then people are excited because it's rare. So I feel again very fortunate to be in that kind of position. But yeah, it's definitely hard. I recorded a lot of the demos for this, like with my kids next to me playing Minecraft, like telling me to shut up, like Daddy, you're too loud. I'm like, yeah, that's gonna happen. It's my house. Yeah, so, and I think that's true for all of us. There's definitely things that we haven't been able to do that we would have liked to because, either, hey, I got to be at work, or I can't leave my wife to take care of the kids again, or whatever the case may be. and actually, yeah, right now with all of that's going on, putting the album together, and like it's been a lot of work, and I'm definitely not as present as I'd like to be at the moment. And I just try to make sure, when I'm looking at my calendar, like, schedule in like date nights and stuff like that. Like, like today, I knew I was going to be coming here, and there were some things that I needed to do, just normal house chore stuff. And I was like, well, I've been gone all day. I'm going to be gone all night. I'm going to spend this next 45 minutes building Legos because, like, that's important, and I like Legos.
What were you building?
I was actually building a ladybug.
All right.
Just from
Freeform?
just freeform.
Freeform. I was, yeah. My youngest is very into ladybugs. He's like a huge ladybug fan, so I'm just trying to build him a ladybug.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
they are very beautiful and shiny and adorable.
And I have to say, I'm doing a pretty darn good job too.
We want to see
getting-
pics of this thing.
but
I'm doing a lot better of a job than I expected to. So, but
Sounds great.
yeah.
using all the red bricks and then the tiny single black ones.
Exactly. I'm shocked how many of these things I have. I mean, I've got all my Lego from when I was a kid, and then all the ones that they've bought. Like, we've got this giant, like,
Yeah.
the kiddie wading pools, like the big blue Toys R Us pool, just like full of Lego, and to try to keep it off the floor. So
Doing parenting right. Just have the big Lego pool and just make sure they don't Scrooge McDuck it and try and
right. Oh, that's happened. That was yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And then kicking it out, and then it's everywhere. But
Yeah,
yeah.
my brother has all of our childhood Legos because he has the children. So
that doesn't sound fair at all.
well, I mean,
Go splitsies at
yeah.
least.
what am I going to go over to my niece and nephew and be like? So I know that you've been playing with these your entire life, but technically these are mine.
Yeah.
So
These were my Christmas present at 8 years
yoink.
old.
Yeah,
It's very kind of you not to take them.
yeah.
out of your hands.
I'm a hero.
Totally.
I'm merciful, and they should be thanking me. So what were you gonna have something else? Because I wanted to see if we could. I wanted to shift.
Starburst.
I just started eating Starburst because
We need the red versus pink weigh in before we close up shop here. But
yeah, I
take your time.
mean that needs to happen. We need a verdict. But I wanted to
You've wrapped these in different. These are not the right colors. You're gonna blindfold me and
That would
screw with
be-
me, aren't you?
no.
It's like a wine tasting.
I don't think I would want you to eat my manhandled Starburst. But if that were the what's that?
Band name called it.
Manhandled Starburst.
Yeah, we're playing at the Vic next month.
That's a good one. I like that one.
But if that were the case, you would have to compliment me on the wrapping job
Yes,
I did.
They definitely look professional.
I wanted to shift into talking about faith a little bit more, and because you had mentioned growing up in the church, going to camps, and having you said that you're more Christian now than maybe earlier back in your college days when or maybe you said you were writing some songs about some of the push and the pull and the some of the trying to deal with who you want to be versus the way you're living sort of things. So I guess I'm kind of curious where you're at now. What are some of the things that you would say define your faith now?
Well, that's a big question.
That's what people come to MagPod for.
That's right.
Come here for the big questions. Come for the Starburst. Stay
you
for the
can-
big questions.
You can chew on a burst as you pontificate.
I mean, I
but,
think you basically just asked me to like preach the gospel, right?
No.
How am I going to answer that question? Well, I can say this. I grew up with my faith being a very intellectual exercise.
Okay.
I believed in my head all of the stuff that I was taught about God and Jesus and creationism and everything in between. And I think my whole life was pretty much like, okay, I got saved, and now I'm just going to try to not sin too much, and everything will be fine. Which, of course, you fail miserably when that's your kind of perspective. And I did fail miserably a lot. So throughout, but I didn't know really. Like, it's so easy to have a perspective that like you're on the right path and everything's great, and not see all the BS going on at the same time. So like, I've got all these like Christian tattoos, and I'm saying I'm singing. I mean, half my songs were prayers of one type or another, and at the same time, like, I'm just a huge jerk to everybody, and like just really self-centered, and just looking out for myself basically, which was, I mean, I'm still working through why that was a thing, like why I was spending so much of my life like trying to get other people's approval. Like, I'm in a punk rock band, who cares what people think? Oh, please like me. And which, I mean, to be honest, like being in a band was a huge part of that. Like, just, oh, maybe if I can get enough people to like my music, then I'll be a person of value,
Right.
Maybe if I can just get this girl to go out with me or whatever, oh, maybe then, well, she's really hot, so if she likes me, then I must be something important.
Yeah.
And that was basically the entire, that was many years of my life was, kind of, I mean, hopefully that wasn't evident to everybody around me, but definitely my band saw that, my close friends saw that. And I would say that was at least part of the factor of us breaking up too, was just like me not being like, basically I was being a very judgmental person about like, well, I don't drink or do drugs and I'm a Christian and all this stuff, like kind of stereotypical evangelical judgmental person. And I'm not any better, like I'm just doing things that I'm justifying and then pointing fingers at other people for doing things that are probably far less damaging to other people than what I was doing. So in the years not in the band and stuff, like, I got married, I had kids, I had to face a lot of my junk. And so just over the last, 10 to 12 years has just been kind of this ongoing process of like, just figuring out, like taking the blinders off of like my life piece by piece and seeing like, yeah, that has been a problem for 20 years. Like, I need to actually look at that now and not pretend like it's no big deal. And so in that process, just coming to terms with like all these things that I no longer want in my life, or these kind of either whether it's a behavior or an attitude or whatever, in that process, my faith became more than just like a get out of hell free card thing, and more about like, okay, I really do believe that like the things that Jesus taught are actually the wisest way to live. And people may hear that if they're not Christians or whatever, and they have preconceived notions of what that means and go, oh, geez, that, oh, great. Okay. He hates gay people and, all the, whatever
Right.
the stereotypes are.
Sometimes justified stereotypes.
Absolutely. And not justified necessarily because that's right, or that's what I believe or whatever, but just because that's so commonly,
Right.
Spoken, or that's how a lot of people, interpret what they read or what they believe. And, so anyway, yeah, so it's become a process of just going, okay, well, I think this is the best possible way to live. I do believe there's a God. I do believe that Jesus died for us, and that like, I mean, God wrote the instruction manual for life. So even when, I've heard it said, if your religion if your religion doesn't ask you to do anything hard or that's like counter to what you naturally want to do, then like you're just worshiping yourself or something to that effect. Like, what's the point of having like a faith that's just all of the natural things that you feel? You know what I mean? So there are things that I have to struggle through and understand, and why why does God say that this is right and this is wrong and whatever. And just I think I'm coming to terms with the fact that sometimes there's just not an easy answer to that question, and being okay with there not being an easy answer, and still just going, okay, well, but I still have to live my life, and I still have to, like, I mean, the prime directive is love other people, love God, love people. So anything that doesn't, anything that doesn't dovetail with loving everyone is probably wrong. Of course, everybody has a different idea of what loving people means too. So, I mean, we can have a whole conversation just about that.
We talked about that on our Michael W. Smith episode. Michael Tate was up on stage talking about, it's like, why can't we all just love each other? And John and I were sort of, after the show, kind of were talking about that, like, well, because for some people, they think loving them means telling them they're going to hell and saying, look, I love you and I don't want you to go to hell because you're a sinner, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
And some people are like, whoa, well, that doesn't especially sound really loving. To me, it sounds like, sounds more like a judgment, or, because earlier when you were talking about having disagreements with people, but still understanding where they're coming from, you can say, like, oh, I might disagree, but I can understand what you're saying and what you want to accomplish with this position or X, Y, and Z. And I think love outside of some sort of relationship isn't really love, because there's a lot more messiness involved in loving somebody than just tacitly being like, oh, I'm just gonna tell you the gospel, and that means I've checked off the love box for what my faith means. But it requires a little bit more work to love somebody, because you have to sort of embrace the dark and the light that comes with everybody.
Right. And I think, I mean, you can, everybody needs to be loved differently and at different times of day. Like, there are times where I need a hug, and there are times where I need somebody to talk to, and there are times that I need somebody to, hit me upside the head. And all of those can be love, but it's the best kind of love if that's what I need at that moment. And I think a lot of people, let's just stipulate that there are people who, like, through good motivation, will do that whole, like, you're going to hell talk. Certainly there are people who are doing it and saying that they're being loving, and they're really just want to knock people down. They want to, boost themselves up by kind of saying, just basically proving that they're right in their own mind. So let's not talk about that. But the people who, like, are genuinely trying to do what's right, and maybe even, hopefully do care about that person, it's still misguided if that talk is not what that person needs right now. And you can, I pretty much believe that, most of the time, like, telling someone they're going to hell, like, that's not going to get through to anybody. Like, if your purpose is to show them that there's a God that loves them, and that God wants to be in a relationship with them, and that God is not, like, looking at every bad thing they've ever done and, like, pointing the finger and saying you're in trouble, then you probably shouldn't point the finger and tell them that they're in trouble, right? Like, that's not just scaring someone into, like, belief. Like, you don't, it doesn't work.
Well, yeah, it's the dad's coming home from work,
right?
And he's going to find out. And so
there may be behavior modification that happens, but there's no heart change that can happen through that. But there is heart change that can happen through learning to understand each other and actually caring about, like I could sit here and tell you all the things I think and believe about many different topics. But if I want to have any chance of convincing you of any of them, I probably need to hear your side of it, and just care a little bit about what you think. Otherwise, it really is just all about me feeling good about myself.
Yeah, and I think that is a lot of it was, at least for me growing up in the church, was reflected in kind of what you were saying about trying to tamp down sin, limit the potential of me going to hell, and trying to my best to do what I thought was the most godly thing, while simultaneously, feeling immense shame for all the masturbating I was doing, and like wrestling with all that, and being like, why am I not able to be this person that I want to be? Isn't this what you want, God? Why is this?
I know that prayer well.
Oh,
I mean, literally, we have songs of that prayer. So
yeah, no, it's very much decades of my life, but I think a lot of it too, going back to some of your earlier comments about working on your own stuff, and for me, I'll just speak for me. I won't put this onto your own experience, but at least listening to you made me think about my own struggles with self-love and self-hatred, and needing to be like, well, I am worthy of love and friendship and relationships, and encouragement and support, and I'm not a total piece of garbage, and that I'm 35 now, and that's still something I'm talking about in therapy. It's hard.
yeah.
Because a lot of that toxic theology I grew up with, of that, I'm being hammered into me as a kid, that I'm terrible, horrible sinner, and I'm not worth anything. The only reason I'm worth anything is because God let Jesus save me from my horrible sinner self. And that sort of way of thinking about a child, and be like, well, I guess if there's no escaping sin and I'm a terrible sinner, then, and so it's just decades of that sort of repetition that
And it's not clear to you, and maybe even to the people saying it to you, that they're in the same boat when they're telling you that, right? Like, if that's true of you, then that has to be true of them too.
Right.
But as a teenager, that doesn't come through. You just see a pastor who must be perfect,
Right.
Except kind of a jerk or whatever.
Right.
And you just think, well, I'll never be that guy,
So I talked about this on a previous episode. I just finished reading. Are you familiar with Pete Holmes?
No.
Comedian. He has a podcast. He just wrote a book called Comedy Sex God. And so a lot of what we're talking about is a reflection of his own experience too, growing up, and a lot of the shame and embarrassment of growing up in the church and being a Christian and trying to figure out his own stuff. But he has this part where he talks about that when he went to church, he believed everything that the adults told him because they're adults, and at the same time they're these unpaid volunteers teaching you the secrets of the universe in their free time, and you don't know necessarily the damage they might be doing because they're doing it out of what they think is right, what they think is true, but
and their own brokenness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and there are some Sunday school teachers' own beliefs that might not be the same beliefs of the church, might be seeping into.
Oh, that never happens.
So it was it's rough, and so I went through a period of deconstruction, sort of just like breaking down everything that I believed, and now I'm in what is essentially a reconstruction period, trying to make sense of what I don't believe and what I do believe, and changing some definitions, which I think has been, a necessary thing for me. I think the definitions of certain words, they can carry a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
And something I wouldn't have been able, some things I wouldn't have been able to say 6 years ago, that I'm starting to think about how I want to reframe my own beliefs. But anyway, I don't mean to.
No, I mean, that's, it's interesting because one of the things I've learned as a parent is the message that I mean to send doesn't matter. What matters is the message that my children receive. And a lot of times I have a really good intention of wanting to teach them something that I think is very important or whatever, but the message they receive is something very different. And I mean, I don't have a specific example, but a situation might be that the father goes off to work every day and never sees his children, and he knows that he came from an immigrant family who never had any money, and now he's like working 2 jobs to make sure that his kids can go to college, and his whole life is consumed with providing for the people that he loves, and his kids' experience is, well, Dad must not like me because he's never around. And so I think these things are super important. And I mean, I had a similar experience growing up where my dad came out of Catholicism very jaded, and had become, a Baptist, and like the theology is night and day there. And so he heard this whole idea of, Jesus dying for you, and it's only, you're saved by faith and these kinds of things, which is the opposite of the Catholic guilt kind of stereotype, earn your way into heaven. And so he hammered me with that. And on one hand, I still believe that. And on the other, I think that, he meant to do a good thing by teaching his son what he believed was the most important thing in the world. And at the same time, since all I seemed to get was, like, if you say this prayer, then everything's going to be okay, because it doesn't matter what you do, the result was I didn't think about anybody else.
Right.
I didn't think about loving other people.
Became transactional.
Right. And so, and I don't think that was his intention to teach me. I think he was just trying to, like, really make sure I understood that I couldn't earn my way into heaven or whatever. And as a result, I kind of tried to earn my way into heaven, so it's kind of this weird, I don't know exactly how that happened, but it's had to become a thing that, I've had to come to terms with, of like, oh, like, I actually think, like, Christianity is about something fairly significantly different, or at least much bigger than just getting into heaven, or even getting everybody into heaven. Like it, I don't know. I think it's very much about how we treat people, and that we're kind to people, and that we're doing the best that we can to help other people, whether or not they're going to listen to our theology. Like, I mean, my church gives free cars to single moms away. They don't make sure that they say the right prayer before they do that. They care about the community, and they're going to do something about the community. They're not handing out tracts,
Right.
Like, well, okay, here's your car, but here's 30 things you need to believe now.
Right.
It's just kind of like, hey, we care that you're in a bad spot, and we want to help you. And if they experience, like, genuine love from strangers that way, and become interested in what motivates them to want to behave that way, then great. I think that's kind of more of the Christian kind of concept, is like, let's love each other because it's right, And then if people want to know more about that, then good. But really, the Bible says that that's all God's doing. Like, every person who comes to him is really because, like, he set it up to be that way, which is that's a whole discussion in itself, right? Like, what does that imply about the people who don't believe in hell and whether that's real and all that stuff? It's not easy topics, right? If they were, we'd all agree on them.
I love those topics, and sometimes I think that the level to which I want to go deep on some of these, like, I think it's another podcast.
Right. That's a whole episode of just one conversation, right?
Yeah,
and
we'll
that,
bring you back for part 2.
Yeah,
and
right.
Get into that stuff.
And there's times where, like, I really do. I'm a very analytical person. I think through a lot of this stuff very carefully. And it just pains me to see either Christians who are living in such a way where they clearly have not figured out. And I'm 40, right? Like, I thought I had it all right at 20. Now I'm 40. At least I know I can't possibly have it all right. But there's no way. Like, if the 60-year-old me looks at me now, he's going to be like, God, that kid was an idiot. So I think that's just the process. But
shouldn't that be the case? Like, shouldn't we always be, like, I hope I look back as at 60 and be like, oh man, like, but that means I'm progressing, I'm growing. If I looked back and right now was at my 20-year-old self, I'm like, oh man, that guy ruled. Then you guys would be like, I don't know.
yeah, but why does it have to be that way too, right? Like, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Because that's the world we live in. And there's a part of me that goes, okay, so if this God thing is for real, why? Why does it have to be that we're all screwed up and have to, like, spend our entire lives, like, struggling through everything to finally get a glimpse of truth, when he could have just made it all super obvious and we could all have great time, And so those are the kinds of things where it's like, well, I don't have the answer for that. So
Well,
I'm just going to keep going with what I have.
I would say that, I think as much as there is struggle, and I'm just going to speak from my experience because obviously, this is all in speaking from a particular context, because somebody else's experience, it's certainly going to be different, but I feel like this is what I'm living now is the best. It is the worst at times, but it's also the best, that I do get to experience life at all. And I'm grateful that I even have some level of awareness of this life, because and that I've lived as long as I have and to live in a time that I do, because I'm not going to operate under the assumption that I'm guaranteed any other chance or opportunity to live past this one life, because I'm just not convinced otherwise of it. So some people will say, well, I think, people talk about heaven, and I think that there are times where you could argue that we could make our own experience right now on earth if we lived in a more loving and enlightened way. We could make it more, I'm not talking like some sort of utopia, but that we could live out a more Christ-like heaven, kingdom of heaven now sort of way that he was preaching that could be a more Christian reality rather than the sort of personal relationship that a lot of Christianity makes Jesus. Like, Jesus is your boyfriend sort of thing. I'm in love with Jesus, and make it more about the people and the transformation, right? Like, isn't that what the hope is, to have some sort of a heart transformation, a mind transformation, and not be like, well, I'm not really staying here, just passing through to the
Right,
next
yeah.
life. And
Well, I mean, when you look at what Jesus talked about, there was way more of him talking about bringing heaven to earth than
Right.
bringing earth to heaven,
Right.
And so, I mean, the term kingdom of God is used a lot in the Bible, and it's like, when you really understand what that means, he's not talking about some cosmic realm. He's talking about like the state of the world in which he is in charge, and that like it's his domain or whatever, and not a lot of people like that idea, but the idea would be like, we are going to treat each other better, like that we are going to look out for each other and be more concerned with someone else than ourselves, which is super hard, especially in modern American society. Like, I mean, I work at an evangelical megachurch, which is like, a terrible thing to say in a lot of circles, but because of the stereotypes that there are now about what that means about how people treat each other, because that's the predominant narrative among that term is like, Trump supporter, hates all the immigrants, hates all the gay people, like, and I'm like, well, that's not the evangelical Christians I know for the most part. There might be a couple of them that snuck in there, but we are generally trying to, we break it down to, we're not trying to do good things in order to earn salvation or earn God's approval. We do good things because we have salvation and God's approval. And so it's like, when you've been given a lot, like, then you have it to give away. And then you do want to share what you have with other people because it's a good experience. And I've had to be very honest with myself at times in my life where I go, I really shouldn't be telling people about Jesus because, A, I'm not a good example at all. And B, I'm not even sure I've got anything like that I've actually experienced that's all that great about being a Christian, depending on the time of my life. I could say that now, but in the past it was like, being a Christian's really been a hassle more than anything, and just a lot of guilt and a lot of feeling like I'm not good in general. And I don't think that's what Jesus wanted for anyone, based on what what the Bible says he said and did. He was very welcoming to people who society rejected, and it pains me to see Christianity portrayed on the media, and probably accurately most of the time, as being very intolerant, very us versus them, America first, that kind of thing. Because I just and the fact that people can actually say those things and say Trump's defending Christianity or whatever.
Right.
Like, no, he's really not. Like,
No.
he's saying the word, I support Christians or whatever, but his actions are the exact opposite of the concepts of Christianity, as far as I can understand.
I think as far as most people understand.
Well, I hope so, but that appears not to be the case, right? Because
Right.
seemingly the majority, or at least a very large portion of American people who call themselves Christians, whatever that means to them, because it means different things to everybody, unfortunately, they think he's right on, and he's a great dude, and who's just doing the best stuff for making sure that Christianity is the state religion, essentially, or that's what they want. And people wanted that kind of thing in Jesus' day as well, and wanted him to do similar things like that, overthrow the government and stuff. So it's nothing new. It's just very disappointing that history continues to repeat that way, and that people who, associate themselves with what I seem to see as something that's about caring about other people, they turn it into, I'm more important than you, and whatever I want is what I should get. It's just so hypocritical.
Right. And, in someone like Creflo Dollar's case, how much of a money you can get for a new private jet,
Right.
or any of these other televangelists that are fleecing poor people out of their, hard-earned money so they can get plant a prayer seed to grow their own wealth.
Right. The scary thing I think about is, what if they really believe that? Like, what if they really think that they're doing the best possible job of being a Christian, and that's why they have all this money? And if I can do it, then what's wrong with you? Like, you just got to do the same thing I do, and then you'll be rich too, and that's what God wants. Like, no, that's pretty much the opposite of what is taught.
Well, this is something that I think is fundamentally broken in our country, and it's something that I don't know exactly when it started being taught, or if it's just this pervasive in media. Is that so many people in this country, when you look at the way people vote, and you're actively voting to help make these people richer, and they're giving themselves tax cuts while taking away your health care and all your benefits. And why is that? And people are still opposed to taxing the ultra super wealthy, and it's because people don't think, well, I'm not rich. It's that they're not rich yet. That people still think, well, when I'm rich, when I'm there, when I get my big break, I don't want to be taxed that way. And I think it's this sort of American ideal that anybody can make it. Anybody can make it big and get rich, when it's rigged in a way that's not going to happen. Most people are not going to be millionaires and billionaires, but these somehow many have been convinced that it's in the cards for them, just not yet. They'll get there though.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to even imagine that kind of mindset. It's fairly obvious to me I'm never going to be rich, or well, let me amend that. It's obvious to me I'm never going to be rich like the people we call rich, and at the same time, my wife's Filipino. I've gone to the Philippines and I've seen what poverty looks like.
True poverty.
And when they tell you on these TV ads and stuff, growing up, oh, they live on $2 a day or whatever, and you're like, you can't even conceive of what that means. Oh, well, there just must be no work and no, oh, these people are out there 16 hours a day trying to sell some trinket on the side of the road because that's how they're going to feed their family. No, they work their tails off for that $5 a day or whatever it is, and this is all that they have and all they're ever probably going to have, because that's the only opportunity that's there for them. So I mean, when we talk about, I'm constantly checking myself about, my entitlements and expectations about,
Sure.
I drive a 10-year-old car. Well, it's getting a little rusty now and stuff. And boy, I could probably afford to just trash this and buy a new one now. It'd be justified. And at the same time, I go, what a waste that would be. Why would I spend what money I have on a nicer version of the thing that I already have? I've been looking at guitars, right? Everybody likes guitars.
Sure.
I have a few guitars. I have more than I need, certainly. I'm not even that good of a guitar player. And yet here I am looking at building a custom guitar because it would be blue. Now it's a little more complicated than that. There's very specific features that I would like to have in a guitar and all that stuff. But you know what? I'm not taking guitar lessons with that money. I feel entitled now that I have a job and my band's doing okay. It's not making money, but I'm playing in front of people. I should have the absolute nicest guitar that I could possibly want. And I found a way to do that at a reasonable price, right? So why wouldn't I do it? Well, because I'm going to sell a couple of my guitars and spend a bunch more money that I could spend on something better just to have a blue one. Because I really like blue, That's rich. Like the fact that I can even think about doing that. I mean, I could do that right now if I wasn't like ultra cheap, right? Like that would be an easy purchase for me. And it'd be a huge waste, And so there's just stuff like that I just think everybody should think of themselves in America as very wealthy, unless they're like genuinely homeless. Because any of us who are driving a car are in whatever the top 1% of all the richest people in the world right now. And, just because, I live in, a pretty nice area. I go to a church with a lot of like people who are much wealthier than I am, who have two incomes, and they have a nice house over in Inverness, and it's beautiful. Yeah. And, and these are what my friends have, and they're driving Teslas, and, and it's justified in their income. And I really want that. But why do I want that? Like, why does that matter? But for some reason, we're humans, and we always want what we don't have, and we keep striving for. Even in the band, like, oh, well, we did these great things. Well, as soon as I'm done with that, I'm disappointed that I didn't play this festival, or didn't open for this band, or don't have 100,000 followers on YouTube or whatever. And it's like, I guess it's just that constant striving for more, and I think that's part of, to bring it back around, what is driving a lot of the political discussion of just like everybody always wants more and always wants better and wants to step on anybody that they need to in order to get there. And if you're coming in here illegally, like suddenly the people who are, getting lots of government money for their farm are against welfare, and the people who are, cheating on their taxes are really mad at the illegal immigrants. It's like, no, we're all in the same boat. Why are you making yourself out to be something better? Well, it's because it's you, and you want to believe that you're a good person and that you deserve good things. And, my president over there says these guys are animals. So it's easy to believe that when you aren't happy with who you are and where you are in your life, So I think, I just think the more we become aware of that kind of thing, and the more we start being concerned with other people and what their needs are, rather than what our needs are, like that's what love is. That's true concern. And I don't think I have to have a relationship with the homeless guy on the street to think, you know what, I need to give that guy the $5 I have in my pocket. It's not going to change his life, but he needs it more than I do. And that's something kind that I can do for that guy. And, I don't always give that guy that money. And that didn't used to bother me, because I used to tell stories about, well, he's just going to buy drugs and this and that. It's like, it's not really my problem what he's going to do with it. I'm going to try to do my best to do something kind, because maybe I just need the practice being kind more than he needs the $5. You know what I mean? So that was kind of a rant in a bunch of different directions, but that's I hope it kind of made sense to some degree.
I have 3 thoughts. Number 1, thank you for your time and for your candor. I think it's been a great conversation. Not that I'm saying it has to be done. Number 2, I think we should pause to hear some of Snake in the Grass, the new single. And number 3, we'll come back and hear a final verdict on Red versus Pink, Starburst. Cool.
Cool. Let's take a listen to
Snake in the Grass.
Snake in the Grass.
Wait for me by the sea. I'll tell you everything you needed to believe. Through recorded messages and texts, the deception like no other. You'll know the truth when you discover I'm more than an inconvenient lover. Try to keep the intelligence brief. This plot is not as thick as it seems to me.
That was Snake in the Grass, and it's a banger.
Yep.
So it's one of your, it's your first single since Making Friends, the Lagwagon cover that you guys did last year. What was the impetus to do that Lagwagon song?
So actually, we recorded it before we even got back together. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a documentary called A Fat Wreck about Fat Records. That was really cool. It had a lot of puppets in it, which was interesting.
Speaking my language. Punk rock and puppets.
But actually, no, it was a really cool documentary just on the early days of Fat Wreck and how it came about and all the bands that were that started it. And so at the time, they had kind of put out a call like just for covers of early Fat Wreck bands. And we weren't together, but we were talking. Like we had kind of started writing a song, but not really. And I think Dan just said like, "Hey, what if we did a?" I think he just said like, "Let's just do Making Friends this way," and like sent us a phone demo of him just playing a riff. And you know, I wasn't doing anything. Like it was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Like it'd be cool to have something out there and whatever. And so so that happened very like separate, like, and I didn't hear it until it was basically done except for vocals. And when I heard it, I was like, whoa, this is very different from the original and
Yeah.
really cool. And
I love how fast it is.
it was a surprise to me too. So like, and then I just did my thing. Like this was the very first thing when I ever recorded anything on my computer. I just like go download Reaper and let's see what I can do. And so, you know, I just kind of sang over it the way I thought it should be. And then I started playing like, well, I can do harmonies here now. So I just started adding like layers of harmonies and stuff. And so I like to say it came out like if Bad Religion covered Lagwagon, because it's pretty much just straight up ripping off what Bad Religion sounds like. But
That's there's no problem with that.
right, exactly. So, but speaking of, I mean, we were talking about, you know, just loving the guys in the band and what they do. Like,
Yeah.
like the chords that Dan used on that song were like stuff we'd never done, and it was just so cool. Like the drumming style was very different, just really energetic, and then the bass lines were just like, that was literally, and I've told him this, the bass lines on that cover were what made me want to get the band back together, because I was like, if this is what we can do with a cover, like let's write some music, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then so it's been out there on Bandcamp for years, just kind of floating. And so pretty recently, as I was preparing to kind of get the new music out, I was like, well, now I can release a couple old things on Spotify or whatever. And so that's why it came out in the last few months or whenever that it did. But and people seem to really like it, and it's like one of my favorite things to play live too. Like I'll fight for that to be in the set. People are like, well, people want us, we only play like 5 shows a year, people probably want to hear our stuff. Yeah, and I really want to play that Lagwagon. So, like, nobody's going to be mad that we played Lagwagon. So yeah, so it's fun.
I'm into it a lot. What else were we? Did you have something else that we were going?
That's it for me.
It's all for
I
you.
need that Starburst verdict.
Yeah.
So I need to taste these 2 very specific Starbursts and tell you
yeah.
which ones taste
Yes.
Yeah.
better. All right. Now, not like I said, normally I go with the red first, and then I'm surprised by the pink. So I'm gonna turn it around.
Do we have any water? More water for him, so he can
Spit out between.
cleanse his palate. I was going to say.
No more
There's no
water.
need for that,
Sorry.
man. It's sugar. I'm very happy.
All right,
See,
so
this is the guy who gets it.
crinkle it. savor it.
Chris is putting the Starburst into his mouth
You
and
know
chewing.
about ASMR?
Yeah, my wife's gonna turn it off if she's bothered. She doesn't want to listen to me for 2.5 hours. I don't know who will, but
Just tell her to fast forward to this part.
honey, you got to hear this.
All right, so
The
pink.
chewing. Oh, so you went pink first,
Yeah, that is very tasty.
Yeah.
right?
Initial thoughts.
It's been a while since I had a Starburst, actually.
Well,
Been a while.
there it is.
Yes.
I think we have our third pod host.
Yeah. There's
Been a while.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, really isn't much the same, just sort of like Stained. Isn't that kind of what you were going for?
Actually,
Much the Stained.
we had an early review that said something about. It was like the first real review we ever had, and the guy said we sounded like was it the Replacements? I Could Walk 1,000 Miles band. or
Proclaimers.
whatever?
Proclaimers.
That's the band.
a
Yeah.
favorite unmagnified pod.
Right? Like, and it even said like they probably don't want to be compared to this band. I'm like, I don't know what you hear there, but
Oh, man.
this guy's reaching. So anyway,
That's
so
some rules.
Stained, the Proclaimers.
I love it. It's bringing all our worlds together.
Yeah, it's all good. Nickelback.
The Prostainers.
I think it's about time the world had that supergroup. Okay.
All right, so
Moving
that
on to
was
red.
pink. Pink was delicious. Let's
Okay,
go for
okay.
red now.
This is it. This is the moment of truth. How's it stack up?
I'm getting like a cherry Coke flavor, which is
Yeah,
really
yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
Like that?
Yeah, it's there it is.
Let me get that.
Yes.
Into
Perfect.
I think I just prefer whatever I had second is just how it goes now.
E.g.
Because
Red.
the red is super good.
Yeah.
Alright.
Red Riders. Red Riders.
All right, so
Sorry to disappoint.
that's right. You know, I mean,
My wife betrayed me in our last episode by going pink, so I'm glad I have a new partnership.
Your wife and your son, right?
yeah,
both
he did.
went pink
Oh,
on you.
yeah. Has he actually eaten it? Did he eat it? I don't
No, he
remember.
didn't eat it, but
He just likes it.
Jenny asked which one he preferred.
right.
Oh,
is
okay.
Red or
Yeah.
pink, and he said pink. So
He's betrayed me. Okay. Well, that was the most important thing we did tonight.
Now everything I say is like
Yeah, well.
still in
that's
my
what happens.
teeth.
As if we haven't plugged it enough, pick up Much the Same's new record, Everything is Fine, next month.
Let me plug real quick too,
Yeah.
because I don't know if we said this. So it's out on 3 different labels if you want the physical copies. So there's Thousand Islands Records in Canada.
we do have some Canadian listeners up in the Scatch.
I'm
so-
sure you do, because especially Quebec, the punk scene is just nuts up there right now. And so that's our North American label. You can buy it from them in the States. The shipping is super cheap. Everybody keeps asking who we're going to put it out on in the U.S. And nope, we're going with those guys. And then Lockjaw Records in the UK is covering Europe, and P Records in Australia. And each of them have different exclusive colored vinyl and exclusive T-shirt bundles. Lockjaw's got a cool hoodie that has the Shining version of a T-shirt that we've been wanting to make forever.
It's cool. Is the P one a yellow vinyl?
Actually, no. Why not? I don't know. No, theirs is like a blue ghost. I
That's
think
cool
it's
too.
transparent blue.
I like Blue Ghost.
John, can you plug the record in your Australian accent?
You got to give me a little more notice. Coming out on P Records, Much the Same, legendary Chicago punk rock band. Pick it up on our Blue Ghosts special edition. That's as best I can do
That's
right now.
not bad. We toured with the Decline from Australia not that long ago, and
It's kind of
I'll
like
have
being
to
back there.
I'll have to ask them how they. Yeah, they surprised me with like they don't say how you doing, and I'm not gonna try the accent,
Say.
but they say how you going,
How you going?
which just blew my mind. So
Crikey.
yeah, no, there wasn't a lot of crikeys in
No,
there,
okay, never
but
Did
yeah,
you do?
the Decline, very good Australian band.
Gonna Another Australian band that we throw around, Frenzalram. You
Oh,
ever
yeah.
you ever play with Frenzalram?
We haven't. I would like
yet.
to. Body Jar, huge
Sure,
band
sure.
in Australia, not so huge here, but
No, they
huge
had,
influence though on us. Big, very big
I
influence.
feel
on,
like they
on
had a
us.
song like a single like 20 years ago that I picked up somehow back when I was in high school that I don't know how I came about hearing a song, but yeah, I'm only vaguely familiar with them. I probably should be more.
Yeah, Body Jar is a fantastic band. Actually, I think their last album had a song as we were listening to it that was like exactly the same as one of our new songs. I'll have to go back and listen to it again. But we were laughing like, wait, what? What are we listening to right now? Didn't we write this song? Wouldn't be the first time we ripped off Body Jar though.
Yeah, I need to look up what is this song that I not the same.
Yeah.
That's the
Fantastic song.
that's the song that I remember. So it was 2000. So it was about almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
There you go.
There it is.
Not the same, much the same.
yeah.
It's all coming together.
No use for a name.
Yeah. There you go.
That's why we named our band Much the Same, actually, because we sound like No Use for a Name. And so,
So when you settled on the name Much the Same,
terrible idea. Just awful. Stupidest thing ever.
well, I was wondering if you were like writing reviews in your head. It's like
Headlines.
the headlines
Much
for
the
like
same keeps it much the same.
it's like much of the same
Yeah.
for
Yeah, every guy who's written that review, and there have been many, has thought that he was
I'm so clever.
really clever.
yeah.
No, that was, yeah.
New album from Much the Same, Anything But.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Please file.
I think one of the labels was asking us to go find old reviews to like use for press, and so I went back to I found an old alternative press that had and it was
Just like the Proclaimers.
It was like much the same, more like improved was the subtitle, and then the whole review basically just said, hey, these guys kind of managed not to suck anymore. Like 4 stars. Like what? Like, it's so weird. No quotable thing in that review at all.
Well,
I feel like a lot of those old
In
alternative...
case anyone was thinking about listening to our music, just don't, apparently.
I think a lot of those old alternative press snippet reviews were... I think didn't do a lot of those bands because they were like, what, 6 sentences
Yeah,
at most?
they were pretty short.
And
But really, how much are you going to read about an album you've never heard before and may not ever? So I can understand, give it a good, this is great or this sucks and leave it at that.
right. But you will listen to a 3-hour podcast. Just to be clear.
Yeah, for sure.
how times have changed. That it's like, oh, this band I've heard of, I don't want to hear any nuance. What do these 2 jabronis from Chicago have to think about punk rock from the 90s?
Yeah.
This is
Quite
what
an avenue we've carved out for ourselves. All right. Should we drive this thing on home?
I think we should.
Okay. Yes. Much the same. Get the new record. If you want to give us some feedback about this app or about anything else, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can rate and review us and smash that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. What else can they do?
They can leave us a voicemail at 872-762-4763, 872-7-MAG-POD.
What about that email? They can hit us up at...
What about it?
I don't know, man. They can hit us up at magnifiedpod@gmail.com. If you want to support us, hit us up at patreon.com/magnifiedpod. Get some of that merch at magnifiedpod.storeenvy.com. And what else do we have to say? Anything else? I think that's it.
I think that's it.
All
I don't
right.
think we know. I think maybe probably one of the next episodes we're going to do is going to be launching into 5-iron because
So,
John, and I feel like we need to say this because this is going to be an actual use of this horn. So this is our 40th episode, and when this airs, it will be one day before we launched this podcast a year ago.
special day.
So June 18th is our 1-year podiversary.
All right. Well,
So
yes.
it's a big. I can't believe it's been a year.
That's crazy. It's been a while.
It's been a while. My favorite Much the Same song. So
It's not that 1,000 Miles song.
I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Aren't Much the Same? They're from Scotland, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
When I have
yeah, we all know that Chris McGrath havers
right.
a lot,
Just
and
deep cuts.
he's a havering kind of guy. So thank you everybody for
Yes.
being with us for our hundreds of hours of podcasting,
Yes.
and that joining us on our next journey into another band. It'll be a good time. We're
What a
looking forward to it.
milestone. Thanks, Chris, for joining us for this
Yeah,
important
thanks for
occasion.
having me.
Yeah.
And
It's
join
close
us.
to my house. It's great.
Perfect. Join us on the next episode when it'll be about time for podcasts at our house, and it wouldn't be the same without you. So join us, won't you?
for me by the sea.
Yeah.
All right.
You say that?
Can you say, "I'm a pink boy"?
I'm a pink boy.
That's right.